Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
And here come the Boilermakers.
It's what you talked about all year, making the Final Four as the first step to the national championship. So kind of taking that floor. I don't know if it was so much today, but the first time I kind of took the floor and you realize damn, I'm in a football stadium playing the Final Four. This is what I watch every year.
The key to guarding Caitlin is you cannot get emotional about the shots she makes. She's going to make some ridiculous shots. You can't let it take you out of what you're trying to do. Flings it out. Clark, open three. Is good.
I'm loyal to where I live, and the A's should be in Oakland.
I'm kind of glad they're leaving,
The lack of attention, the lack of support for the city, for their fans. Let's just kiss and say goodbye. I'm going to miss you, but let's just kiss and say goodbye.
I know season ticket holders that stopped going. Yeah, no. Can't support them if they can't support us.
Good. There it is. Good morning.
Hey, is this thing new?
Is this thing on here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities? That's DB. I'm Ravi, Lulla. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as on the Pillar Exterior stage. DB,
huh?
I'm happy this morning.
How are you? Why are you happy?
I'm thrilled.
Happy's good.
Can I tell you why?
Because I did not put the blinds down, so you feel like you know that you live amongst the living. Because that right there is driving me up the wall. I can't even believe I didn't see it. I want to pull those down so bad.
Do you need to take a minute? I can
because that's kind of weird. I should be able to wait 22 minutes without having too much anxiety.
You should be able to, but I don't know if you can.
Hey, start pulling a coach rule, man. I may be over here licking my lips like. I'm nervous.
Cam, would you mind pulling that blind down so that our guy doesn't have a
like all of them. Doug Thizzle, K Bizzle, Cam Broham.
That's Cam. He's taking care of us over here. So my guy DB doesn't have a little mentee B over here.
Man,
and,
hey, what's that mean? Oh, breakdown.
Mental breakdown.
Oh, yeah.
That's what they call them on TikTok. Come little mentee Bs.
Hey, listen.
It's cuter when you say it like that.
I may have to do something. And one of my guys, he was it T-Mac? Somebody told me a while ago I could reset my TikTok. I probably need to reset my
your algorithm?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Because there are a couple of things I'm pretty much over.
You got into the weeds on a little bit.
So, and maybe it's not my.
Thank you, Cam. You're an all-star.
Cam, you're the man. I don't care what Shane says about you being second fiddle. Yeah. So I'm over the discord of Caitlin Clark and who she's playing against.
Okay.
This whole white-black thing and women's sport, I don't. And I guess it's probably not anything that I clicked on too special. I just think it's news for my timeline.
Yeah. It'll probably wash out here in a few days.
We're going on about 8 days.
Yeah.
And so now I'm getting these cut ups of when she fouls or pushes or whatever. And I just look at my phone and it's I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't I love sports. I like the sport of women's basketball.
Yeah.
She grew the sport. She's going to be great against whomever, whenever.
Yep.
I don't care why people watch her. I don't care about it sending this message. She did something in a short amount of time. Very, 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 very few people can do. She elevated a sport tenfold. And it wasn't even the fringe. It was people that couldn't give a rip.
Yeah.
At all. That would sit down and tell you, I've never watched a women's basketball. They weren't even give me a reason to watch. She was just so interesting.
Yeah. She became so mainstream
that
you were missing out if you didn't watch
it. And I don't think it's too much hyperbole. She pulled a mini Tiger Woods.
I was just going to say it's a Tiger Woods. That's the only comparison.
She pulled a mini Tiger Woods.
That's the only comparison.
And I just got a news flash, right? I'm a little, and maybe it's because they haven't seen this before on this coverage, on this stage. But when you're an advocate of your sport, try advocating your sport.
Instead of gatekeeping?
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's every soccer fan ever.
It is unbelievable. Well, yeah,
Soccer fans are.
There's like 65 Lexi Lawless. Like they're all like that.
Yeah.
Like just embrace. Like it's okay. Come on in.
You don't have to come in as an expert.
She can be as good as you. Like it's okay.
And that's shockingly.
I can't believe it. I'm telling you.
It shockingly is the one thing that didn't really happen in golf.
But
with Tiger Woods.
But people
they didn't really gatekeep.
So socially, shout out to all our ladies listening this morning. Growing up or when you're in relationships or whatever, like your boys will tell you, oh man, there's nothing like a woman scoring.
Mm-hmm.
So that narrative or that stereotype had to kind of come from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the level of petty amongst women covering the sport about somebody that is transcended too strong of a word.
No.
That has elevated and listen, you can talk about the Caitlin Clark thing in addition to South Carolina's dominance, and you're not disparaging South Carolina. Because I got South Carolina, for as great as they are and being undefeated and in rare air, right? It was still a region, unless you were a fan of. See, they were always going to get that caveat. Unless you're a fan of. See, Caitlin Clark, you don't even have to be a fan of.
No, you really don't.
So it's vastly different. Stop killing your own, man. It's like,
there's this problem with, I'm going to say, niche sports, and I know women's basketball fans are going to be mad about that, but there's these problem with these sports that are just off of the mainstream.
Dude, am I pulling a rule?
No, I think you're okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I haven't noticed it yet.
I don't have any moisture.
There's this issue with sports that are just off of the mainstream where if you don't come in as a perfect fan, they want to throw you out, right? And that is, it's kind of the same thing where people who discover a band before they have their first big hit, they get really mad. It's like, well, you only like them now because they're on the radio. It's like, yeah, where do you think people hear music? Or where do you think people heard music back in? Like, yeah, I don't have people sending me EPs before they're actually released on the radio. How am I supposed to know about this song before it's on? Like, oh, cool, you're super plugged in. Congratulations. I'll come to you as a resource. Not everybody's going to be like that, right? Not everybody is going to be the perfect fan to start, but guess what? Neither were the gatekeepers when they started, right? Nobody comes into a situation knowing everything about the situation. They get drawn in by something. And then if they really love it and are obsessed about it, then they become an expert, right? It's whether it's bands, whether it's women's basketball, whether it's soccer, whatever it is. I went to like a wine tasting thing on Friday, right? I'm not a wine expert. I like wine. I like drinking.
Who's going to crush my grapes? Who's going to make my
right?
wine?
But like a lot of people are intimidated by wine stuff because they think people around it are pretentious and they look down on them for not knowing stuff. And maybe some people are. The people I were with, thankfully, weren't. And I was just like, hey, I'm really more of an enthusiast than I am an expert. And they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like, but why can't women's basketball embrace the enthusiast rather than the expert? Right? Like, why can't soccer embrace the enthusiast rather than the expert? Because guess how many people that came to watch Caitlin Clark yesterday found out that South Carolina is a really damn good basketball team? All of them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how many of those people wouldn't have known anything about South Carolina if they hadn't tuned in for Caitlin Clark?
Oh, yeah.
Right? How many people became Sergio Garcia fans because they tuned in for Tiger?
My favorite is when people say, well, if you're a fan, you would have known. No, you're trying to, like, you're trying to grow it. Man, I don't know if, like, Hot Day's messing with me, but he says, isn't this the opposite of DB's case they take? No, like, it's not that, like, that's not that complicated. Because, number one, I understand. I'm sorry for this sidebar, but it needs clarification.
Run away.
What I'm talking about is it taking away the sensation and the phenomenon is what people gravitate towards, as opposed to getting into Nebraska's journey, right? So you may say, well, Caitlin Clark, you're taking away. I'm not talking about people wanting to like Caitlin Clark because she's a phenomenon. I'm talking about people not embracing her greatness or knocking her down when she's an ambassador for your sport. That didn't have anything to do with Casey as a person. I'm talking about media or folks that are like, and I'm not mad at Pat McAfee, but what that does is when you shouldn't get on a national talk show and say things like, what is it? Like not know how to say his name, number one, or I mean, this guy, like, I mean, he's a 3-point shooter, right? Okay, I get it. That's one guy, but you have a responsibility speaking to your audience to it. Like, and I'm picky. And I said, hey, it doesn't necessarily make me right. It probably can make me weird, but the story is greater than just coming by to be entertained and then getting out. That's nowhere near the same as growing the sport and not recognizing that you have an ambassador for the sport.
So can I make a distinction here that I think is important? And I don't know if this is how you would put it or even how you mean it, but this is how I differentiate those two things in my mind. Because I disagreed with you on the Casey thing. But I think I do understand the difference here. At least I see a difference, even though I was on the other side of the thing with Tominaga, is Caitlin Clark is a worthy ambassador of the attention, right? Casey, while a good basketball player, the attention outshined what he was and what he meant to Nebraska. Nebraska was a good basketball team that happened to have this guy that could capture your attention. Caitlin Clark is one of the best women's basketball players we have ever seen.
Yeah, so
she is that's why Tiger wasn't a sideshow. He was the main attraction because he was worthy of being that ambassador.
So guess what?
Yeah.
At some point, like, and I was on the call. I saw it live. I was there. At some point, I wanted to move on from the spring game being about Jack Hoffman.
Sure.
Is that? Ooh. Do you know why?
And we love TeamJackFoundation.org.
I love, like, I emceed the event. Like, yeah. I have a niece with cancer, yeah. Right? We're praying it doesn't spread to her brain. So that's not the issue. Right. Don't make it. What I was saying was, at some point I want it to be about what it's about.
Yeah.
And until you get to a point where you're good enough, it will always be about the periphery
and not about the actual substance.
That's
with Caitlin Clark. It is about the substance.
It should be. That's now, the difference. It doesn't have anything. It's not about the particular. Even what you said about being worthy, like I'm very reluctant to use those terms like worthy, because I'm not assessing value to an individual person. What I'm saying is, in its totality relative to what we're covering.
I mean, a worthy ambassador of the sport, not worthy as a person or not.
Well, I think it just this further shows that they're two completely different things. Yeah. Like I wouldn't be on if Casey, a better analogy would be if Casey Tominaga was player of the year, and he would do what he did to everybody that he played against regardless. And Iowa hasn't had that kind of track record since 1993. I'm not trying to poke holes in his game.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to tell you what he isn't.
Yeah.
So I don't understand that. Well, it's not even remotely the same.
Anytime, but here's why I brought up the worthy part, right? Because it's not worthy as a person or worthy as an individual. It's worthy to be basically the flag bearer for your sport or your team or whatever, right? And this is a dramatic example of it, although it's probably it's a dramatic example of it, right? Like Jackie Robinson had to be good. Like he had to be good.
Oh, hey, listen, that's an amazing example, because do you know what I get sick of hearing? As a black person, that Jackie Robinson was black. Jackie Robinson was an unbelievable athlete.
He's one of the best athletes we've ever seen.
That's a perfect example. That is right, Dabs. I have argued this till I was blue in the face, because the counter argument that I would always try, he wasn't that good. It's just because he was black.
No,
take a look at when he left.
He was an MVP.
But that's all
it was like maybe his third best sport.
Hey, listen, that is a beautiful example. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
But he was good enough to be a worthy flag bearer.
It gets lost in the discussion because
people
that's what we make it about.
We only remember him because he was the first back player. It's like, no, he was an incredible athlete and a great baseball player.
I had a meltdown on air. Imagine that
flag bearer
in like 2015
of the cause
over that Jackie Robinson thing.
Yeah,
I promise you. And some of it just fits my personality, right? Like, again, doesn't necessarily make me, although I do kind of think I'm right in this, it doesn't make me right. It does make me weird, right? So I would fight against the identity of being an athlete because I didn't want that to be the only reason they like me.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I would always say, hey, would you have me over for dinner if you didn't think I was good at sports?
Yeah.
Like, would you ask me to speak at and I get some of that comes with it, but I fought it for so long because it's part of the insecurity, right? It's like, hey man, I'll never talk about sports if you don't ask me about sports. I want you to see me as the whole person. But
it's like it's a self-worth thing, right? Because if you only value yourself as an athlete,
100%,
you worry that only other people do too.
And I've seen it kind of like derail. I've seen that sentiment kind of derail careers to some degree. Some people are so,
we saw it recently,
bent to show you that there are other things
that they stop doing the thing.
They stop doing the thing that they're good at,
and that they probably love.
So
to a certain degree,
right?
Like
I just, if you're,
it's one of those like you bite your nose to spite your face type situations. It's like you want to be viewed as more than that by so many people and so much that you give up something you genuinely enjoy and are good at and care about just to prove other people wrong. And you don't even embrace the fact that, hey, this is part of me. This is part of who I am.
Yeah. It's like, and you don't have to get into, you don't have to know pin downs versus flare screens versus, drop coverage or icing ball screens to be captivated by her skill set.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so it's not, it's even a little bit different than soccer, right?
You don't have to go deep and go like, oh, well, is she as good as Cheryl Miller? Or, well, you weren't watching Louisiana Tech. And
you don't even have to go back that far. Like, you could have picked Shamika Holsquaw, and I would have been like
Diane Taurasi, Brianna Stewart. Like, pick one. It's like, oh, you weren't here for Sabrina Ionescu, right? Like, you weren't here for that. Like, so why are you?
And that's I don't think I should be mad at that, right?
You shouldn't.
Okay,
whatever brings people to the thing you love, you should embrace, right? Like, as long as it doesn't actively deteriorate the thing you love, you should embrace whatever grows it, because
I just think at some point you just kind of have to recalibrate. It's like, I don't know who's, I almost said Shane. Cam, who sings that's like, where do we go from here now that all of the children are growing up?
I don't know that one.
Cam, do you know?
It sounds familiar.
Oh man, Cam's
on top of my head though.
You're a music head too. But anyway, it's like, okay, so where do you go from here?
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
she's not going anywhere. So like, you just gonna rail against Caitlin Clark for her entire NBA career?
Like move on.
Like, the Las Vegas Aces already had to move one of their games against the Indiana Fever from a 12,000 seat arena to a 20,000 seat arena.
Yeah.
You don't think that's good for the WNBA?
Yeah.
You don't think that's good for everybody's bottom line? You don't think that Caitlin Clark coming into the league is going to impact the dollar amount and maybe even the number of zeros that comes up when the league gets a new TV contract in 2025? You don't think that's going to be good for everybody?
You
don't think Michael Jordan was good for everybody?
And all this started over why I'm just like, are you not getting it? And even great players like saying that, and it's just an opinion and it shouldn't. I guess it's cool. I just
that's what old heads do though.
I don't understand why we get into the championship discussion, because the championship discussion, and I've said this since I was old enough to function and string two thoughts together. So probably 3 years ago. But yes.
For you, it's a tiebreaker.
It's a tie. It's all things being equal. Then I'll get to championships.
I care about it a little more than you do, but I don't care about it in college the way I do in the pros.
Well, I mean,
there's a lot of really good college players that never sniff a title.
I think it's my background because I played in the ultimate team sport. I'm not into
individual
like
titles.
the individual capping.
Yeah.
Right.
It's different in basketball. It
right.
is.
Because I would never sit here and tell you that Phil Ellis was any less valuable than Ed Stewart. And Ed Stewart won a ton of awards. Ed Stewart's one of my
yeah.
But I couldn't sit here with a straight face and say, "Hey, man, like that's not an integral part of what we were doing." You know what I mean?
Like, do we think Scott Frost was a better quarterback than Eric Croucher, Turner Gill?
No.
Right?
Yeah.
But got the title.
Yeah. And that's yeah, I was going to expound, but there's no sense in.
I mean, listen, you
make
the argument that Tommy's
that's a
one of the best quarterbacks in college football history, so that's a bad example. But the titles enhance that argument. They don't create it.
And even the people that don't agree with that will pick at his stats.
Yeah.
And then you have to go to
because they don't
the
understand
intent. Yeah.
What
so it's like for me it just clouds.
Yeah.
Am I watching greatness?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm 100% sure I am.
Yeah, and I don't have
and I like the sport. So they're in my head. I'm doing mental gatekeep. I'm like, did you watch Brianna Stewart? Did you watch Maya? Like, how would you skip over Maya Moore?
Yeah.
Like, if you really want to get in the weeds, how do we just skip over Maya Moore? She walked away from the game on top because she could.
Yeah. What if somebody comes up to you and says, "No, I didn't watch Maya Moore"? Like, are you cool? Like, they're watching now.
Do you know why Shamika Holdsclaw stopped playing?
I don't know. I know Maya Moore was
on top of her game as an all-star and MVP in the WNBA. Mental health.
Okay, I don't remember that. I knew Maya Moore. Like
she has social interests.
Yeah, she was like getting people out of jail.
Yeah, she has social interests.
I remember.
So it's like, I'm not trying to do that. I just want, like, that would be like, I don't know, like Paul Azinger and Nick Faldo and some of these guys, like discrediting, and there were a few that did it and they weren't received well, but like discrediting like Tiger Woods. I mean, you can get into the equipment discussion and, you know, the Jack Nicklaus thing, which I get, but in the modern era, just keep it simple. Never seen anything like it. Yeah. Most incredible thing I've ever seen. And then like that folly and stuff, like at some point it detracts away from actually marketing the game, and it's dangerous in an individual sport because this is a weird segue, but now what are all the guys from Live saying? This isn't sustainable.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to market the individual. It's in the, unless you're amongst generational greatness, it is hard to rally around the face. It's the same argument I made for baseball, me being cool with them not needing a star,
Ohtani or Trout or whoever to be.
Hey man, part of the allure of baseball is it can function without having to make that marketing mistake.
And that's kind of the bet that the NBA made for itself, is it always needs a star.
Yeah.
Right? They made that.
We're already talking about who's going to be the face of the league. We've been having this conversation for 7 months.
Yeah. We made that choice they made that choice when they marketed Michael Jordan the way it did, and that's the bet they have to lie in now. We will continue with more. We got more college basketball. We didn't even get to the Calipari stuff yet this morning. We'll talk to Sam McKewon at 8 o'clock. We'll talk to Isaac Trotter from 24/7 Sports at 9. More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We'll be right back in 5 minutes. We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Here at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill on the Miller Exterior Stage. FTV, I'm Ravi with Cam producing for us here on a Monday. Great show coming up for you today. As I mentioned before the break, we've got Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald at 8 o'clock and Isaac Trotter from 24/7 Sports. Talk a little college hoops with us at 9. There is a national champion being crowned tonight.
Yeah, we got college coaching carousels. We got national champions. There'll be a lot.
There's a lot to get to with college hoops. We will get to Calipari and that whole mess that got started off with SMU firing a pretty good basketball coach. And then kind of kicking off this carousel that we're on here. But before we get to that, speaking of coaches, I wanted to get to Nebraska's coaching clinic that they had over the weekend. They had Bill Belichick was in town, pushing 1,000 people attending those camps. I know you were down there as well. And all in the midst of this. And I'll be honest, I don't know how Coach Rule functions at this level with this amount of like chaos and everything that goes around him, right? Because so he's got 1,000 guys coming into town. The night before that, he's at the Jet Awards with us.
Mad scramble, as you know, behind the scenes.
Yes, mad scramble to get him
accommodate everybody.
Yeah, to get him where he needed to be, to get Coach Osborne and everything for that. So he's doing that on a Thursday night. Friday, he's got 1,000 coaches in town, including Coach Belichick.
This dude canceled this dude. I'm sorry. My apologies. Not
Coach
to sound canceled dinner with Coach Belichick on Thursday night.
Yeah, you showed me that text. I was like, is he being serious right now?
Yeah, he's dead serious.
In order to be at the Jet Award, which is, first of all, an incredible flex by not only Coach Rule, but also by the Jet Award.
And took it down like he was going to try to make it work for everybody.
Yes.
And something had to give.
And his ability to operate in chaos is unbelievable, right? Because not only is he doing that, he's canceling dinner with Coach Belichick. He's got 1,000 dudes coming to campus for the coaches clinic that they didn't shut down registration for until night before, basically.
Got a lot of us idiots in town that are going to be high maintenance.
And then in the middle of that, he's got Will Compton and Bussin' with the Boys out there in Lincoln to do a little PR tour for.
I was talking about this with a couple of old heads. And there is two things. Number one, he doesn't skip a beat.
Mm-hmm.
He just, it's on to the next thing. Dominate this. What's next?
Mm-hmm.
Dominate this. What's next? Like he stays like that. And I think this is the first time, and it doesn't really matter which era you talk to, right? Whether it's Nate Gary or, Will or Ricky Henry, who I got to see him and Mike Caputo come up and
Caputo, Miller North guy.
Listen, and who I've always been a huge fan of. Like anyway, so he comes up from behind and like this big guy just puts his arms around me, and I look around, I turn around, and it's Ricky Henry, and
were you there at Burke when he was there?
I got there after his senior year.
Okay.
But I was still doing their broadcast. So, but anyway, like just the embrace of a guy that I just brought up on the show a couple of weeks earlier, comparing him to Tyson Terry with their meanness on the field.
Yeah,
like thought enough to come, and it's me and Foreman. Like we're way in the corner on the opposite end of the field, so we're not in the fray. I had to tell him afterwards. They were eating upstairs, and I said, "Hey, I know this is gonna sound weird, but I'm just telling you, like that probably made at least my next couple of weeks, right? Because it's just cool. Like that's what that is all about. When you get to see old guys that can cross eras and there's mutual respect, and not even you don't even have to like a big time, like he's just a regular guy that like just respects. There's just a mutual respect. I was like, oh man, this is gonna be it's gonna be a good week.
Yeah,
right. I gave him the love touch. I said, all right, give me some of that good karma, here for the week. But it's just it's crazy because with all those heads in there, and he's hopping in drills, and it was super intense, and people were cheering. It was an environment, and I said this I was talking to one of the former guys. I go, this is interesting because you have to be careful because it's easy to get caught up in the moment and you compare and contrast. But this is the first time since I can remember two things. First time in 30 years I've seen people that were of practice, and it always used to happen when we would go live, goal line situation. We would do 5 plays from the 5, 1s versus 1s, 2s versus 2s, and what little media there was, probably 15 guys and a couple of friends of the program would be at the end of practice because that's when we always did it. And the practice was just turned into to be electric, right? And you knew guys were jumping around, hype. That's how it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, where he would call out guys and they would do these one-on-ones, and it was so competitive. And he was like the master of ceremonies.
Yeah.
Give me such and such and such and such. I want you at quarterback, you at DB, or live pass rush, where you would just call guys out. And it was like bull in the ring. It was electric. And I said to this former player, I said, I got to be careful.
Mhm.
But I've been telling myself that since he's been here.
Yeah,
Got to be
for
careful.
a year and a half.
Because the first thing I said was, wow, man, this is way different. But I said the same thing last time. I've said that probably 4 times in the past 16 years.
Mhm.
I thought about it for a second, and I caught myself mid thought. I go, but the difference is I'm not comparing this to other regimes. I'm not comparing this to from year to year, like saying, hey, 2022 feels a lot different than 2021 because I'm comparing them to themselves, right? I'm comparing 17 to 16. What I'm comparing now in my head is it just looks and feels like football. I'm comparing it to football, not what he did last year, not what I saw in 2019, not what I saw in 2013. It looks and feels the practice tension with a knife. It is highly, highly intense. I told you Friday morning, it's this weird feel. There's this intensity, but guys are still cool. Like it is electric because I don't think you're afforded the luxury of having days off because nobody else does.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, what's Coach Rule working on? 3 hours. I saw Keith Williams. I mean, my man, literally, he's working on like 3.5 hours sleep. He said, yeah, I had to catch a nap last night because we didn't get cleaned up until 1. What time did you get back this morning? Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Well, 4:15. Huh? Yeah, I had to take a quick nap, man. It's go time. I'll rest on Sunday. Who did I see Sunday at the homegrown clinic? Keith Williams. Directing traffic.
Yeah.
For youth.
Yeah.
So when that bar is set by what's happening at the top, you can't help but to be a part of it.
Well, and so I think what's important there is
you got to get on board, or you got to find something else different to do.
Well, and you kind of said it there with comparing against a standard of what is your expectation versus comparing a standard of a low bar that had been set previously.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
I'm looking at this dog will hunt.
Like you can go from 21 to 22 and be like, oh, well, they look a lot better than last year. Oh, this is different than last year. You can go.
I can look at Mike Riley in year 2, and I was like, oh yeah, he learned from last year, man.
Yeah.
This feels a lot better.
Great, right?
But that's not what this is.
But they set their own expectation, and then they're just exceeding a poor expectation, right? Like that's the difference between, Coach Rule talks about the standard all the time.
And I remember I always used to have to say to I don't know how this is going to play in the Big Ten, but for what they're doing, I would always say that because, I didn't want to fall victim. And I'm kind of a tough critic, so it was like, this, and we'll continue with this, is definitely portable. If you get your tail kicked or you get whipped in one-on-ones or team, or they make a play and your team has 6 transactions coming up because you're in 8 transactions because you're in last place, you better figure it out.
Yeah.
Same as it happens if you have a bad first quarter or you're down 13-0, or you need all that stuff is portable.
You better figure it out.
Figure it out.
We will have more spring practice nuggets coming up next before we talk to our guy Sam McKewon here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes.
cooking.
I mean, Jalen Lloyd might be. Maybe I'm a little early. Maybe I'm a little crazy. Is there a chance Jalen Lloyd is kind of the star of that wide receiver class that we didn't realize?
So of that class?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but
I know you've always been Jalen Lloyd.
Yeah, and
West Side guy.
that's why he was my sleeper.
But like, okay, so we had Coleman.
Yeah.
And I still think he could be really good. Like, he's obviously got all the physical tools you want. He had some moments last year. They're really high on Demetrius Bell, who didn't play last year.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously you've got Jaden Doss, who they really, really liked, got hurt, ended up playing a little bit last year. But those are kind of the guys that people keeping their eye on from last year's class.
And you're talking about non-portal receivers, right?
Yeah. Just guys that they brought in as freshmen last year.
Yeah.
Right?
Because they definitely have a Sunday guy that they brought it through the portal.
Yeah, and you're not talking about Banks.
No. And Banks is good.
And he might be a Sunday guy too. But you're infatuated with Nair a little bit.
Yeah. Listen, Sunday guy.
Yeah. As long as he can stay healthy.
Yeah, he'll be getting drafted.
Which is that's the only reason he didn't produce at Texas. I'm sure of it.
Sunday guy.
Which is not something they've had a receiver for a hot minute.
Mm-hmm. He's pretty freaky.
So that's a huge thing for them. But I think we may end up looking at this class that had some. I mean, every receiver was more highly touted than Jalen Lloyd. Everybody in that class was.
Everybody.
Jalen Lloyd might end up being the best receiver.
He's something else.
Is that crazy?
No. I like Barney. Too.
He was in this year's class, though,
different.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was gonna say different class, but there's a lot of young guys I like. But
and that's not to take anything away from anybody else, right?
So I'm probably better at telling you who I think can't make it.
Okay.
Than who definitely will, because there's no definitives, right? Things can happen.
Who are you most concerned about then?
There's a couple guys. I mean, so you have to be able to do. So where I was going to go with that, and then I'll get to that, is you have to have a couple of things in your toolbox, and pay attention how long it takes me to get to talent. Okay. You have to be really, really competitive,
okay? Especially with the staff.
You have to show up every day,
especially with the staff.
You have to be mentally tough. Okay. Then you have to have a certain baseline of talent. Yeah. And I'll throw in another one that I think is important. You have to kind of be other-centered too. Like if you're the most important thing out there, it's only going to get you by from time to time. You need to have this ability to say, what else is going on around me and how am I fitting in this?
So let me use receivers for an example, right? Because that's what we were talking about. So being other-centered as a receiver, that looks like, okay, so like best case scenario.
You got to be able to look at a guy and say, why is he where he is?
Well, so if you're a receiver, best case scenario, let's say you're getting 10 targets a game. That's a good number if you're a number one receiver, right? Let's say you're catching 7 or 8 of those. How many plays you run in a game offensively? 70, ideally?
You better hope.
So you're talking about.
There were times they'd be in the 50s.
Right, but you want to be 70.
Yeah,
right?
Low 70s.
So 1/7 of those plays are you directly involved, right? So there are 60 offensive plays a game. Let's say you play all 70. Why not? Right? If you're the number one receiver, you're probably playing close to all 70 of those snaps a game. Pretty close.
Yeah.
Let's say 60 of those other plays. If you're not other-centered, what are you doing those other 60 plays?
Well,
right?
you saw it last year with Malachi Coleman on the backside post. He's not the guy.
Yeah.
Harburg made him the guy by he could be one. He knew he was going to get mono coverage, and he gets safety in 3 deep that like rolls down for whatever the reason. Maybe it was the run action, whatever. But because Coleman's busting his hump on the backside, it's like stealing, right?
And if he's not,
he's not, he's not a touchdown. And we heard before, because this guy is rapidly becoming one of my favorites as a coach, and it's probably more of who he is as a person. But Coach McGuire is, good at what he does, and it's not necessarily from teaching wide receivers because that's He's got a tough group. Wide receivers on every campus are a tough
It's
group.
Tough group. Yeah.
And no, not that running backs are low maintenance,
Mhm.
but he's got a much lower maintenance group than Barthel has a much lower maintenance group than McGuire does. And McGuire has so many guys in his room.
If you're you usually have more guys in your room if you're a receiver.
I mean, he's a super dude.
But if let's say you're a running back, there's a chance if you're running 70 offensive plays, you could get almost half of those.
Yeah, and so
that's probably not going to happen with this group.
So do you know why I think wide receiver's been tough at Nebraska?
Why?
Because as they've evolved into this team that's thrown the football a fair amount, sometimes if you're not getting elite level high end wide receivers to begin with, and you're developing these guys out of high school, just because one, you haven't been good on off, whatever the reason, you aren't getting top end wide receivers. I think the hard part to understanding wide receivers is rigor. Like the actual rigor, being able to run 15, 16 plays in a session and do them hard, to run a couple of nines or a couple, skinnies and turn around and be able to catch a in traffic backside slant, like to do it over and over again, it is really, really difficult. It's not like a wide or a running back where we use terms like, oh, you got to get in the lather. Oh, hey, you want to get in a rhythm. Yeah, there's no such thing as wide receiver. You're either able to have to make the second play look like the ninth, or you can't.
Yeah.
Because there is no working into a lather, because there's three other guys out there like you, and you may not be the guy on that particular progression. So like, that's why I'm a big do your 1 of 11, and you have to understand 1 of 11, knowing you may not get to eat the fruit.
And on any given play, even on pass plays where you're the primary, you don't know if you're actually getting the ball or not.
Yeah, I think
if you're a running back, you're getting the ball.
Yeah, practicing at a high level hard all the time is something you have to learn.
Which you brought up with this coaching staff, the intensity of it. And to me, one of the most impressive things, if they're able to pull this off, is running with that level of intensity while still having quality team culture, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're that intense, it gets real easy to get a little contentious with people.
If Nebraska's ever good, like functional in the field, it's a wrap.
Yeah.
Because you have a monster at the top who's so. I mean, why are you racing guys up the ramp? That isn't for like. Yeah, sure. Some of it is for media attention.
Sure.
But you don't think he thought he could beat Compton?
Yeah, no, I think he did. I think he could. I think he did.
He's not going to want that filmed if he can't win.
Yeah.
I think he wanted to see where he was at.
Yeah. He's constantly testing.
Yeah. Delaney Walker's like running hard.
Yeah.
Like there's just something about that thing that's why I said before the last break, like you have to get on board. It just reminds me of, like, I remember being terrified to miss practice. Like, oh my God, if this dude gets reps, like, I know he's good.
Yeah.
Those are my reps. But you have to trust that, okay, when I get healthy or whatever, we are still competing. So I just have to make sure that I can do what I do, and then we'll get a chance to compete again.
Yeah.
Where you just feel like, and one of the older offensive linemen said this to me. He said, you just feel like if you have a bad day, it's not over.
Yeah.
Like they don't make their mind up on you, because it's been instilled that this is the Big Ten. It's a long season. Like, you just.
How often do you hear them talk about depth that they need at positions, right?
Yeah, because of how hard they go.
Even at quarterback, which is a place you don't hear people talk about depth, right? They're like, hey, we know it's going to take us a couple guys.
I mean, the first 2 years under Coach Frost, like, they had to cut down reps just because they had 9 healthy receivers, right? It's hard to get it. It's hard to establish rigor without the volume.
Yeah. Really good stuff there from spring practice. We'll continue our Huskers talk with our guy Sam McKewon of the Omaha World-Herald coming up next year on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Here is the sports editor for the Omaha World-Herald, Sam McKewon.
That's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Sam McKewon.
We're gonna throw the ball, and you just stand back there and throw it where you want to go. That kind of thing.
Sam McKewon.
Are you guys going? Sure.
Now, Sam McKewon.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube from the Pillar Exterior stage. That's DBM Ravi Lulla. We're joined by Sam McKewon of the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Sam, we're good. We're good, man. How's the morning? You're out and about already. The nice brisk air, man. You feeling pretty good about attacking this week with the weather?
I am.
Good.
Yeah, we have our all-state photo shoot today in Omaha, so I'm going to that. It'll be fun.
Oh, busy. Do you want to give up the location or not?
I lost you there for a second.
I said, do you want to give up the location or not? You guys always pick someplace cool.
Yeah, it is cool. People have to find out on Sunday. It's a cool place in downtown Omaha, and people will like it. I think the kids are going to like it today. The players are going to like it, and I think readers will too.
Hey, so how do you pick? Because it is always someplace interesting, whether it's hangars or, big atriums or whatever you call them. How do you pick?
In this particular case, it just happens to be something that's in town.
Mm-hmm.
We shot there a long time ago. I don't know how many years ago, probably 15 years ago, but we try to brainstorm ideas. We brainstorm ideas for all state, for all state basketball, all state football, and then the Super Six. And then the other all state teams we just usually shoot at, a field. So, we usually try to find, in all state volleyball, we try to find some interesting ideas. Sometimes, you go to the same place twice. We've used the zoo in a bunch of different contexts. We just try to find, interesting places to go. And I think people will like this one. And it's not something that'll ever be replicated again. So this is a one-time thing,
okay.
And I think people will like it. So, yeah.
Ooh, a little tease there, Sam. I like it. Sam, let's start off with a little Nebraska spring practice here. Obviously, we haven't gotten to see a ton in terms of actual practice. They kind of leak these little videos out that I think some people, definitely not me, spend too much time watching and dissecting. I guess as we get, we're halfway through this thing almost in terms of practices. Is there anything you think we've learned to this point, or are we more or less still in the dark?
Well, I'm in the dark. I don't know if Damon is.
Well, we're talking about us normies here, not Damon.
Oh, Lord.
Like, I operate on relativity a lot, and so not the theory of relativity, but what we can understand relative to what we've already known in the past. And so, spring football only shows you so much. It only reveals so much. And what we know about previous springs is there's usually a couple of position groups that need to develop. In recent years, that has tended to be running backs and receivers. Like almost every year, there's a question mark about who those guys are going to be. I can remember only a few years where it wasn't that way. And so in recent years. And so, you're always thinking about those couple of positions. There's always a conversation about the best culture ever. I'm sure that's what they seem to have. The defense tends to be a little bit ahead in the spring, just generally, and I think that's probably true again. The novelty of this particular spring is the quarterback conversation. And interestingly enough, we've had a novel quarterback conversation now for the last 3 seasons. We had it with Casey, and then we had it with Jeff Sims, and now we have it with the freshmen. So, I think that's probably an area. It seems like, according to what the coaches have said, that things are going relatively well with those guys. I'm not saying that they're going to go out and set the world on fire right away, but it sounds like things are going relatively well, and that things are progressing in a way that's not that's expected and maybe even a little bit pleasing. So that's about what I can glean so far. Not a ton, but that's what I've heard.
Hey, so Sam, since we're talking about observers and time and hyper surface, man, what else is in the future light cones, past light cones? Right. Theories of relativity. As an observer, when you're watching Coach Rule and the time that he spends with projecting the future versus past and his light cones, How do you not get the sense, Sam, that he seems to be a coach that is thinking months or maybe even a year ahead while still being able to function at a high level in the moment. You look at how he utilizes media, how he utilizes former this or used to be that. He sprinkles it in with his current philosophy. Like he comes across as somebody who doesn't skip a beat relative to what we think Nebraska football should look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think he knew going in, and this is a conversation I think we had once last year. He knew going in that one of the things that needed to be mended is just the overall continuity and relationship building within the former Husker football players, the current players, the former players that have been there who haven't played there for 50 years. Like what a 1970 player is looking for is different than what a player who maybe played 15 to 20 years ago might be experiencing. And it's also different than what Coach Osborne experiences or Coach Sullivan. So, all of these things are he had to bring a lot of different kinds of constituencies together. And I think that's the talent that he has. He's able to bring, constituencies together and get them on the same page. I think that's something that he's gifted at. He would be gifted at that outside of football. I don't think it's a football specific gift. I think it's a talent that he would have if he were in any kind of business. So that's something that I think he's been very successful at. I think too that he's probably got a 2 or 3 year plan as to and when you make the choice to recruit athletes who have certain traits versus players who might be completely finished products, you have to have a 2 or 3 year vision because you have to develop the traits. So, he has a 2 or 3 year vision for a player like Jeremiah Charles, or a 2 or 3 year vision for a player like Jamari Butler, who quite frankly is ahead of schedule, maybe perhaps. So there's situations like that where he thinks building a sustainable program. The thing about that is he hasn't really stayed anywhere very long, and maybe that's going to be different here. That he said that's going to be different in Nebraska. So we will see. I think it's one thing to build a program that gets you where you want to go in year 4. It's another thing to get there and then to stay there for another 6 to 8 years. And coaching tenures the way they are and the difficulty of the job, you can't expect a coach to stay very long. You can't expect them to stay 25 years anymore. But I do think he probably has a 3 to 5 to 10 year plan, and he's trying to execute each one of those simultaneously, with small acts on a daily basis.
We're talking with Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, it's interesting you bring up kind of Coach Rule and his long-term vision and plans, because we're talking earlier about his ability to kind of maximize the marketing attention around the football program, whether it's on social media, whether it's doing a bussin' with the boys, whatever it is, right? He seems to have an uncanny knack for promoting the brand of Nebraska football. But I wonder, do you think that's just because of his natural inclinations, or do you think that there's been a hesitancy from previous coaches to actually go out and do that, and that's why it seems so novel to us now?
Well, I think he has the natural talent to do it for sure, and the nature of the job's changed, and I think it's changed in ways that maybe took a couple predecessors by surprise. I think Mike Riley was probably behind that curve a little bit, because Mike had spent so many years at a program that even if it had promoted its brand, and it did in its own ways, it just, what they were trying to get done at Oregon State was to play better football kind of thing, and it wasn't what Nebraska is. And I just don't think that was Scott Frost's wheelhouse or interest level. I honestly think it's going to affect the kind of jobs that I think Frost is qualified for going forward. To me, he strikes me as a coordinator who can focus on calling plays and really doesn't have to sell a program wherever that's at. If he thinks that a mid-major program is going to be the place where it's hard, you don't have to sell anything. That's ludicrous. So I think he's probably better suited as a coordinator. With Rule, again, I think he comes from a school of practice, the way that his parents were missionaries and things like that, and then also just the talent that he has, I think, to make to build the brand. Now, you have to do those things today. The flip side of the coin, of course, is the coaching and the playing piece. That those things matter very much as well. And so, how is that part going? Well, it went really darn well on defense last year, all things considered. It went extremely well. On offense, it didn't go well at all. And that's the part that has to be fixed. And I'll be honest, that part's harder to fix with just culture alone. You cannot. It's very hard to fix offense and just say, well, we're going to have a great culture, and that'll fix it. Kinda. You have to have execution. You have to have talent. You have to have precision, and you got to have really good coaching. Like, those things are all absolutely true, and that won't change. So they're going to have to figure that piece out, and I'll keep reminding people of that as we go through what will be another winning offseason for Nebraska football. The jury's out on whether they're going to figure that out, because they didn't figure it out last year.
Yep.
And I've done this long enough now where I'm not just going to say, like some other people will say, well, obviously it's going to happen.
Yep.
It's not obvious that it's going to happen. It'll happen when it happens.
So that's funny, because I'm probably closer to agreement with you than not. Although I do believe it will happen. How much of that do you think has to do with the fact, because I said this a couple weeks ago, just maybe in passing on the show, I said, we've never had more confidence in a coach that had a losing record ever in my since 2000, right? Like,
right.
We have this elite level belief in Coach Rule. How much of that do you think has to do with the fact that he's done it to some degree at a certain level, even though those two previous stops were vastly different than this behemoth at Nebraska?
I think it has something to do with that. I think it has more to do, at least for me, in just the day-to-day observations that I see in the way that the program is being run.
Good point. Good point.
The quality, the quality with which everything is being done. He kind of referenced it in his Saturday presser when he said, I hope people understand, when we sort of design a logo for the coaches clinic or the quality of the food or anything, that are putting a lot of effort
good point.
toward making everything really good. And so I think there's a hospitality aspect to it. I think there's we are going to give everybody. Now, I think he's also very good at being able to present that in a way that is, very effective. And, there's people who will tell you that if you really get into the nuts and the bolts of an Apple phone, which I have, and a Droid phone, which I don't, the Droid phone might be better. Like, in some functionality capacities, the Droid is better than Apple. But that's not what people think. And so there's some of that there, too, of that sort of Steve Jobsian, I can sort of, reality distortion filter. And I'm not saying that he's but I'm saying he has the ability to take an idea and again, turn it around the corner for student athletes in a positive way that's very effective. And so I think people get on board with that, and that has a cumulative attractive effect. You just got to play the foot. And I'm not saying that I don't believe they'll turn the corner. I'm just saying it's not obvious, because obvious means that the behavior is evident, and that means it's being done. And so we'll see what happens when it's done. Really good about where a lot of their groups are on offense, but it's still coming around the corner. You know, the running back position, I still don't hear the things that I think you want to hear, which is this guy's really, really good.
Smart.
Like, you want to hear that.
Smart.
You haven't heard that yet.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And I'm hearing rumblings of, well, it's going to be a big year for Gaber. Well, you're not even practicing. I mean, we got to get away from this idea of predicting events that have not yet occurred with like 7 or 8 on a scale of 1 to 10 confidence. I cannot predict that Gaber will be that player because he hasn't been that player when he was healthy. Now maybe he will be. I don't know. Divino Zigbo had that experience when he became a senior, and all of a sudden all the pieces were put together. We'll have to see, but you know, I think that's the things that I'm looking for and listening for. That's part of my job, is to listen for those things. I think there's still a work in progress there.
Sam, I've been trying to figure out a way to formulate this question since you talked about, Rule developing guys and having a 2 or 3 year plan for guys. And I'm a firm believer that in order to be a good developmental program, you have to have an identity that you're developing towards, right? Because if you don't know what the end product's supposed to look like, how on earth are you supposed to make plans to achieve something? Do you think Rule does that on more of an individual level than we realize, in terms of he has an identity for what this type of position player is supposed to look like, and he has an identity for what this part of the ball is supposed to look like, as opposed to how we generally think of identity as, oh, this is what the offense is supposed to look like, and this is what the defense is supposed to look like? Do you think it gets more granular than that, and that's why he's had such a good track record of developing players?
I do, yes. I think that they try to look for physical traits. So height, not really weight, because they'll put on weight. Height, length, wingspan, hand size, right? So they offered a kid out of Sioux City East.
Yeah.
He's a basketball player. Well, he has size 11 hands. Size 11. He has 11 inch hands. And he has a wingspan of 7'4". Now he's 6'5", 6'6". But he has unusual, and because of the size of his hand, he has an unusually long wingspan. Well, that's a playing radius that you want on the defensive side of the ball, because it's harder to get around a guy like that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, they will recruit some traits, and they'll try to seek those things out. They want a certain speed profile. You know, they want to see certain things, certain athletes in certain spots. That's not uncommon. Bob Diaco believed in that. He wasn't here very long and didn't really handle things very well, but he believed in that too. And so, you know, you have to, that takes time to recruit the players that you want to that particular role.
Mm-hmm.
And then it takes even more time to develop the players into that. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, again, it's a little trickier, because you can have, of course, you want all your receivers to be 6'2" and 210 and run, 4.3, and then have one small guy that can do other things. And, it's a little trickier. It takes some time to develop receivers. Receivers a much harder position than people give it credit.
1,000% agree again.
And a lot of these guys, now one of the challenges is you recruit guys from other places to come here, and then they don't have immediate success, and then what do? They leave. And because in their mind, they're like, well, I'm not succeeding at a place that's 1,400 miles away from my home, and I can go into the portal and I can go back closer to home and maybe play. And that's one of the challenges that's why you've got to be thoughtful in the way that you recruit, because you can recruit 4-stars who want to leave their home state, but if they play positions that take 3 years to develop, the chances are they're not going to be there. So you have to find ways to develop kids and keep them involved and do all those things. So there's, on the offensive side of the ball, you're trying to find other traits too. You're trying to find high levels of versatility and adaptability, and can they learn the plays? You cannot run a no-huddle offense if your receivers cannot run 6 plays in a row without not knowing the play. And hence, Nebraska had receivers in the Scott Brusser. He wants to run 7 plays in a row. They don't know 7 plays in a row.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they couldn't play.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Scott would do that, and you can't do that. Like, when you're able to run, when you huddle up, you actually can play more guys, because you can send them in with the one play they know how to run. So, it's like, those are all things that you have to consider, and you have to put all those variables down and say, here's what we're going to do. And Matt Rule is as good as anybody I've ever seen at considering all of those variables. And I do feel like he now feels like he has a staff that on the offensive side of the ball that can get that. His comment on Saturday that he said, we're more intentional about, good offense than we were at any time last year, probably any time since I've been here, was pretty notable to me. Like, I don't know what that says about the Sims, and I don't know what that says about the staff, but clearly they felt like in the offseason they had to retool the way they were thinking about playing offense. And it seems like they're thinking about it differently at least.
Yeah, this is like a big brain segment. We've talked theories of relativity, and now we're talking about the fundamental difference between tempo and pace, because they 100%, Sam, are two different things. The problem is we use them interchangeably, and they're not. You can play with good tempo and not have a pace or a rhythm to what you're doing. So huddling doesn't necessarily have to be the end-all, be-all either way, but I do know why they do it, right? Because remember, Coach Satterfield said something early in his pressers, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but he and Coach Rule both said, hey, there's something to be able to look your guys in the eye, call a play, and know that it's going to be executed with a certain level. Like, sometimes you want to be able to do that, but that doesn't mean that you can't play without pace either, right? So to say all that, it's just interesting because when I watch these guys practice, there is tremendous tempo, because that's the speed. That's like the speed at which something is kind of hitting. The pace is done at a rate in which something progresses. So if you want pace, it's got to progress at a certain level that's you think is either advantageous or sustainable. I think that's absolutely why they practice the way they do, because they explain that you can't confuse the two, right? We got to get to the point where we're using pace, where it's actually progressing, but we're going to start with tempo.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very true. And you have to align your players' ability to do those things and then their ability to. So there's, for example, there's probably a world in a couple of years where Nebraska feels like the 11 players they have on the field at a given time can morph themselves a variety of things. And you're not going to, and the defense team, one of the reasons you play you're running a play every 30 seconds is for 20 seconds, is because the defense cannot swap out the personnel. So if you get a schematic advantage, you want to keep it. So there's probably a world in which Nebraska, however many years from now, feels like the 11 guys they have on the field can both be in a 13 personnel and also in 10 personnel, which is that those three tight ends then become receivers. Nebraska once had this, and they had it in about 2012 and 2013. They had players like Kyler Reed, who could be an H-back, he could be a receiver, and then they had players like Rick Burkhead, who, Rex is a running back, but you can really play wideout. So can Amir. And you had these scenarios where they had enough talent on the field. Ironically, Bo Pelini was the head coach, but they had enough talent on the field. Really couldn't. You had to stick with the defensive players they had out there. And I watched Nebraska score 31 on Georgia, a good Georgia defense. And Georgia didn't really stop it. Nebraska stopped themselves a few times. And that was an example of how, if you get to that point, you can be really, really good. And I think Nebraska wants to get there. They want to get to a point where Carter Nelson is on the field, and Carter can play tight end, he can play H-back, he can play receiver. Thomas Fedoni's on the field. You have backs on the field. You're 3-down players, and not just this guy has to come off the field on 3rd down because he can't pass, block, or catch. Like, all those things are still kind of coming together, and they just haven't coalesced. I think once they get all the players that they want on the offensive side of the ball, there's things that they'll be able to do that they're not even able to do now. And of course, it helps to have an old quarterback.
Yeah.
And Dylan Real and Jalen are not. They're not going to be able to do the 400 level offense next season. They might be able to do 200 level, but they won't be able to do the 400 probably in year 2. So all those things line up for Lulla. He's going to have to figure all those things out. And then on top of everything else, you have a gem of a schedule to start next season. You have an opportunity to go 7-0 right away and put the bowl in your back pocket before you even play any of the teams who are more talented than you. And they've got to find a way to put that bowl in their back pocket when they go to Ohio State. Either be 6-1 or 7-0.
That's Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald.
Fantastic, Sam.
Sam, we appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Sam.
Take care.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes. In 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as live from the Twitter Exterior stage. We went a little long there with Sam. So if you're listening over the air, make sure you go
go back and get
you get your podcast. You can check it out on YouTube as well. We got a couple extra minutes with Sam there that were really good. We were too explosive for radio. They couldn't contain us. So make sure you go subscribe and download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts on all major platforms there. But another place you need to go is out to CHI Health Center in Omaha to go see our Omaha Supernovas. On April 20th, they will be back in town. You got about 12 days. They got a little bit of a much-needed break after playing about 5 games in the course of 8 or 9 days earlier in the month. They play Saturday down in Atlanta, and then they're back April 20th here in Omaha against the San Diego Mojo. Make sure you go to supernovas.com for tickets, schedule information, get some merch as well. That is supernovas.com. Really, really interesting stuff there from Sam. I would highly encourage you to go back and listen to it if you missed it. Really philosophical with Sam today, which I appreciate getting into.
This is kind of big boy stuff, but he's right, though. I was like, you know, you can see me, and hopefully if you're on YouTube, there's lots of ways to get us, right? YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, 590.
Not Twitch, just Twitter.
No Twitch?
Just Twitter right now.
What is Twitch? I don't even know.
It's mostly gamer streaming.
Oh, yeah, that's why I know it. Okay, yeah. It's above my pay grade. Dang, Sasha, I'm used to her coaching me up. Why didn't she tell me? You know, she's just pulling all the strings, the DB strings. She just like moseys up to Lincoln the other day. Oh, that was funny. But anyway, yeah, the whole it's just interesting to watch unfold, because I'm telling you, if it works, it's borderline. It could be borderline dangerous.
It's a monster.
If
it works, it's a monster
to the good, because it starts
dangerous in terms of for everyone else.
Yeah, because he doesn't have anything to go on other than his own track record and who he's tried to surround himself with, that it's going to work, because it hasn't for 20 years here.
He's totally unburdened by that,
and
which is incredible and harder than it sounds.
He couldn't care less.
Yeah.
Like, I'm dead serious when he thinks this is going to work.
Yeah.
So when at your core you speak it into existence, it will reveal itself if you're not on board.
You know why I know he believes this is going to work unequivocally is because he says all the scary things out loud.
Oh.
And you don't do that unless you are convicted.
Listen, and he recruits that way.
Yes.
Hey, you could be really, really good. If you don't believe that we're going to win right now, okay, well, next.
How often
are you waiting till we turn this around before I can get your attention? Okay, don't come back.
I'm riding with the guys that are in now.
He said it from day one. And the only people that can really do that are people that supremely believe in
conviction
and what they're doing.
The guys that unequivocally believe that whatever they speak into existence will happen, those are the ones that say the scary things out loud. Those are the ones that say things like, I don't know when, but we will win at the highest level, right? How many times have you heard him say that?
Yeah.
We will win at the highest level. Not, we're just trying to be competitive, or we're trying to be nationally relevant again. No, he's saying we will win at the highest level. Where do you think Coach White gets the conviction to say, we're trying to be the best defense in the country?
We're
trying
so fantastic
to be the number one defense in the country. Where do you think you hear, you get Coach Rule saying like, oh, this is a Sunday guy, or we're going to get players to the NFL, or we're going to like all of these things. And that's kind of what I was trying to ask Sam when I asked about kind of his natural acumen for promoting the brand. Was I was kind of trying to get at, and I probably didn't phrase it right, but I was kind of trying to get at, is he the first guy that's had enough conviction that he could actually get this thing going?
Yeah,
to say the scary things out loud.
He doesn't waver. A lot of people have wanted
to
do what he does, and that's why I think, not to. I just needed an analogy. He has some similar personality traits as Bo, which is why Bo had a ton of success. But there are a couple things Bo didn't have. Number one, Bo didn't have the back channeling support.
Yeah.
Right. So Bo had a lot of good ideas and big ideas. Just didn't get.
Not everybody was pulling in the same direction.
Right. So there was a little bit of that. And then the other thing with Coach P was he's hypersensitive and he is hyper paranoid.
Yes. That's a bad combination.
That's a tough combination to manage without good support staff to kind of help you rear that in, because he was on the right track. And it's funny because a lot of guys in his tenure have a lot of the same temperaments that I'm drawn towards as former players. And it has to have come from your coach. The irrational belief in self has, like, that is totally mild. Like you talk to Nate Gary for 4 seconds. You know who he played for.
Sure.
You talk to Kalu for a couple of Josh Mitchell, like, who they play. It came from their coach, right? So I kind of I'm kind of drawn to some of those guys, even though at the end we felt like, man, it's not us against you, it's we. Well, it was forced to be like that.
That's where
because
the paranoia turned it on him.
Right.
Yeah. Because there were people against him.
100%.
Right? But not as many as he felt like.
So here's the crazy thing about conviction. I'm glad you used that word. Because don't for 1 minute, you know what you don't hear, Coach Rule? We don't read that stuff. We don't pay attention to that stuff. Because he would not be telling the truth.
It's a lie.
He'd not be telling the truth.
It's not accurate.
Do you know the difference between him so far and everybody else? He couldn't care less.
Yeah. He'll even reference it sometimes.
Listen, he couldn't care less.
And he'll be like, we got some people talking.
Are we really going to sit here this morning on April 8th and act like he didn't at one point and say, well, we were going to try a fake field goal from the 50-yard line? And everybody's like, what are you talking about? We don't even bring that up anymore.
Yeah.
Do you know why? Because we have supreme confidence. Not only, okay, let's say he was telling the truth. It may not have fooled anybody or it wasn't going to work. Still wasn't afraid to say it out loud.
Yeah.
You may have thought that was the dumbest thing that you've ever heard.
Doesn't matter.
Because remember, everybody's hand wringing after that. I can't wait. A fake, like you call time at the 50, like nobody was going. It didn't matter because he was true to, even if it wasn't right.
Yeah,
he still said it out loud. It let you do with it what you will, and he moved on. He didn't dwell on it.
That's why
he didn't dwell on it.
That's why we trust him, though, is because.
So why don't we talk about that move in the same vein that we talk about an onside kick? Do you know what? And go back and look at the stage in which he was going to pull that off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know why? Because you believe that the self-awareness to auto-correct and be better will manifest itself. That's the difference. So. He's just, I'm telling it's uncanny.
The self-awareness
uncanny.
Is important because with the conviction, with the saying the scary part out loud, he also gives you the vulnerability of when he's not right. The problem that we had.
Yeah, good point.
The problem we had with previous administrations is that it felt like they always needed us to believe they were in the right and that either we were stupid or we didn't get it or whatever. Where Coach Rule, if he's wrong about something, he'll just be like, yeah, I messed that up.
Yeah.
He'll just go, yeah, probably I'd like to have that one back. In the moment, this is what I was thinking. Like he'll tell you, like in the moment, this is what I was thinking. This is what kind of made sense. But yeah, we'd like to get that one back.
And then some of it is actually there's proof is in the pudding, right? We saw some offensive tinkering with staff. He didn't stand pat.
Yeah.
So that gives you the impression
that he wasn't
cool
endorsing with what happened.
Okay, so that's good. They've swapped out some recruiting roles and elevated some and got rid of some others, which shows you that that's
they weren't cool with how everything went down.
So I think that's
a huge part of it.
That's part of it too.
Because it's self-awareness, it's growth, right? Because if you go into this season the same way you went into last season, let's say they do say, we want to run it back with Jeff Sims. Yeah, we're not bringing in a quarterbacks coach. Yeah, we're doing X, Y, and Z the exact same. Then you're going like, wait, what about last year you think went well?
Yeah, and you know what? It did. It's not like other coaches haven't made changes after year one, but he didn't scapegoat anybody.
No,
he didn't throw Sad under the bus. He gave him a new position and said, you know what? I'm going to play to his strengths, but he's still my play caller.
Yeah,
right. Like that's why I like Sad.
Yeah, right.
Probably more than most, but he's just a guy that I probably would like being around because I know he's not going to let the environment dictate his behavior. Those are there's something to be said for that.
There's something else that Sam said that I want to get to as well. We will do that as we wrap up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, wrapping up hour number 2 here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. That's TV. I'm Ravi. We're here on the Twitter stage, and we're here to tell you about our friends at the Team Jack Foundation. TeamJackFoundation.org is where you can go to donate directly to the cause, as well as find out what events are going on, how else you can get involved with sponsorships, with your business and things like that. That's teamjackfoundation.org. You can also see what projects they're working on with the over $12 million and counting that have been raised to fight pediatric brain cancer, finding better treatments, and one day a cure. They've worked with national institutes all over the place, but also right here at home with the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Make sure you go to teamjackfoundation.org to find out more, find out how you can get involved, or just donate directly to the page there. That's teamjackfoundation.org. Wanted to get to something that Sam mentioned about the offense. He says they were being much more intentional this year about how they're approaching offense. And so immediately the skeptic in my brain goes, well, what were they doing last year? And so I'm trying to find good answers to that in my head while we're kind of talking and going back and forth here about what that might have looked like in a way that maybe they weren't, I don't want to use the word neglectful, right? But maybe the offense that they inherited required more hands-on attention than they realized. I mean, when you hear him say they're being more intentional with the offense this year, what does that make? Where does that take your brain to?
So I thought, and maybe this wasn't what he meant, probably deserved a follow-up, but because they started out with a basic premise and were all in early, right? Like all off season, I think they wanted the offense to be a certain way. And come heck or high water, that was where they pushed all their chips. Didn't turn out to be that way early, so you had to go to plan B.
Which maybe wasn't as developed as they would have liked. And
then you had to re-tinker with the tinker from plan B and get to like C. And then you had to retool and reshape that just to get by. So,
because you could make an argument that, plan A was obviously Sims. You could make an argument that Chubba would have been plan B before he got hurt.
I don't know, maybe.
Because that's what it sounded like early last year. That
I can't confirm or deny. I don't really have a good feel on that.
But, okay, and that's fair. I'm fairly...
Well, I don't have to agree with you, because I don't know.
I'm fairly certain I remember them saying Harburg was behind Chubba until Chubba got banged up. So I'm going to call Chubba plan B.
Okay.
They had to move on from plan B because he wasn't physically ready. They go to plan C, and then they kind of have to go back to plan B when Harburg gets banged up, and they have to go back to Chubba. So they were oscillating back and forth between a couple options that probably weren't fleshed out the way they would have needed them to be successful last year.
So when I hear that, that's kind of what I think. Because when he says intentional, he may mean built in a contingency.
So you think that they're probably building a case for all three guys to have viable options as the starting quarterback?
So I think they're going from the outside in. You bring in a guy, again, this is my opinion. You bring in a guy that can be specific. That's Glenn. Okay? Can be very, very specific. You move the guy that was an overseer and the macro and micro guy. He can just be macro with the concepts, but he can be micro with his own guys away from the quarterback. No attention split there. Just get that tight end room ready. So you covered that part of it. The other thing is you're building all the pieces around that spot. So you put all your eggs in the quarterback basket last year. You really, I think if they're
being honest.
I think you put all your eggs into that singular quarterback basket.
I think they looked at all the other positions on offense and said, we need to be
here,
X, Y, and Z here in order for it to work. Right?
That's why you had to go back into the QB run game and stuff like that.
Don't know how we feel about the running back room. Don't know how we feel about the tight ends or the wide receivers or the offensive line. So we need quarterback to be able to maybe be a little bit Superman-y.
So this year, it's, we're pretty mature up front on our offensive line. Got some depth.
Got some options we like in the tight end and wide receivers room.
Yep. We're gonna bring those. We're gonna continue to elevate and bring those wide receivers along.
We've got some questions at running back, but we got maybe some guys we like the answers.
We're still we're gonna invest in that. We're gonna try to get better around. While we got the new hire, the specific guy, to pay attention just to that.
Get those guys up
just to make sure that my attention is split. They learned from a year ago.
What did we talk about?
They learned from a year ago. When your OC is so bent on getting multiple quarterbacks ready, how can everything else not lack or get enough attention?
There's only so many hours in the day.
So he addressed that part, and it's like defensively this year, similar thought process, but different line. You have a lot of young, good guys. So last year we were hoping, hey, ex-player at Ty Robinson's got to be, man, gosh, can we get that guy to play 45 plays? Right? It was player specific. We really need Nash to. Now it's okay. We got that finite stuff done.
Really nice to get those guys back.
And oh, by the way, we figured out a lot of our young guys can play. So now, you know what phase 2 is this year? Get those young guys to run down the older guys to continue to breed the competition and get a couple of more guys to develop. Okay, how can Umamewelen elevate his game? How can Cam Lenhart be better against the run?
Mm-hmm.
How do we play Van Poppel? Because he's going to be a star, right? Mm-hmm. So you're on to those things in year 2 than in year 1. Mm-hmm. You were just hoping that those young guys could contribute.
Yeah.
So now you're trying to, man, if Poppel keeps progressing, could he catch Ty Robinson?
Is he going to take some snaps away?
Ooh, Ty, better.
He's coming.
Better keep improving. So that gets Ty going.
Yeah.
Right? That gets Nash going. Why? Yeah, Nash doesn't sneak reps because people don't know that he's not good.
Mm-hmm.
Nash wants to sneak reps because everybody else is getting them, and he wants to be a part of what's going on.
He's not trying to fall behind.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's just the natural progression if you're a developmental program of how it works. And we're actually just seeing the practical applications of it. Now, everybody will put a lot of pressure on the schedule. Nebraska staff won't talk about the schedule. They want to be better week 1 as a football team than they were in week 12 a year ago in terms of the continuity and consistency of what their staff brings to the table, because they believe that they'll get the players better.
Well, and we have
that just my synopsis.
For sure. We have the luxury of looking at a schedule where they don't really, right? Because I can acknowledge, I know you don't like schedule talk.
No.
I'm going to do it a little bit here anyway, but
it's okay. No, don't let me deter you. I never do. Don't mind me.
There's a different, obviously, when because you come up from a coach's mindset, right? I come in more from fan analyst mindset where
I just want options. I don't want to be married to one particular player.
For sure. But I'm talking about with the schedule, right? Because you're looking at the schedule. Sam mentioned this, right? Nebraska hasn't earned the right to look at that schedule and be like, oh, we could go 7-0, right? They haven't earned that right. But me as a fan, as a media, whatever, I can sit there and be like, okay, this is a manageable schedule up front.
Yeah, don't
there's a difference.
Don't diminish your opinion because you're not wrong.
Right.
It's just not their focal point.
Which
right?
It shouldn't be.
Because I've said,
but their job is not my job, and my job is not their job.
Even I've said Nebraska will never be relevant again until you start winning home games.
And win the games you're supposed to win.
So
just in general, right?
I don't even get to that second part because I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what that means because when they've been as bad as they have in the last handful of years, I'm afraid to use the word supposed to because you haven't earned the right. You haven't earned the right to be able to say supposed. You have to win home games.
Fair.
Just keep it simple.
What is it? 6 of their first 7 at home?
Just defend your home. If you truly think you have yard dogs, you better guard your yard.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you can't win in college football without winning at home, especially with the way that schedules are moving.
Yeah.
You better defend your home turf. And so always keep an eye on that before you look at anything, because it's too hard to get into opponents with the portal and things change and people leave. It's not college basketball. It's like that can change tomorrow, right? And obviously it will. It's going to change in a couple of hours. I'm sure somebody just inked that's a really good player in college basketball.
Yeah.
And that stuff is going to keep happening.
Yeah.
College football, it's not as bad, but it's similar. Do we really know do you really know what to expect from Northwestern?
No.
We
didn't last year, right?
No. Do we really know what to expect from UTEP?
Do you have any idea what to expect from Colorado at all?
No.
At all?
No.
Right?
So it's like all you
you have any idea what to expect from Illinois?
No.
Right?
That's a perfect example. We thought we knew who Illinois was until the very end when we started doing season previews. And all of a sudden we were getting guys on from Illinois that were saying, I don't know, man, I would have told you. Right?
Yeah, we thought
we're like, what? 2 months ago, Illinois was like a Big Ten darling.
Yeah. Or we talked to my guy, Robert Rosenthal, and he goes, yeah, we're all terrified around here because they never have 2 good years in a row.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember listening to that show bumping around when I was looking for something to do. I remember that.
Yeah. And he goes, yeah, we're all terrified. And he was right. We have no idea what most of these teams are going to be. But if you win 5 of your first 6 at home,
defend
you're in pretty good shape all of a sudden. yards are yours. We've got Isaac Trotter coming up next, talking a little college hoops here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes.
Donate directly to the cause as well as .org where you can go. That is a great fight. Hour number 2 here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube.
We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln for this third hour. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as well. I'm Ravi Lulla. That is DB, and we are joined now on the Pillar Exterior stage by Isaac Trotter. He's the national college basketball writer for 24/7 Sports. Isaac, how are you this morning?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. What's going on in college basketball today? National title game, John Calipari. Anything else?
Yeah, pretty slow day for an April.
Or how about how portable and fluid the transfer portal is, with just good player after good player. College basketball is weird.
It is weird. And you know what? To be honest, I'm totally fine with it right now just because it feels like the interest in the sport is at all-time highs, just because it feels like the season is longer. Free agency is a real deal in the portal. You can rebuild your team in a hurry. Nebraska knows all about that. And I think it's just really fun when you head into a season where you're like, man, we have a really good chance to rebuild our team and be really good right away. And the tournament comes, and the tournament's awesome. And then we also have another situation where the portal hits and the coaching carousel, and it's just college basketball is always in the news. That's a really, really fun time for everybody.
Isaac, it's more than just timing because it's Cal, I guess. But why do you think the Sunday night kind of news dumpish approach? It's odd, especially on the heels of the Final Four. Leaky or intentional for the Sunday night dump?
Yeah, I just felt like it was just an untenable situation there between Cal and Kentucky, and I don't think it was any hidden secret that Calipari was looking to get out. I think that Arkansas, it's funny, it feels like SMU is kind of the mecca of the college basketball world.
Hey, if it wasn't for the ACC, man, I don't know. You never make that jump. Okay,
That's
Coach
right.
Enfield. All right, buddy.
That's right. Yeah. So now you have Enfield. He takes that job, and then Arkansas has to find somebody else because Musselman leaves. And I think for Kentucky, it's kind of a blessing in disguise that Arkansas opened up because now they avoid that $33 million buyout. You know, this is one of the most expensive rosters in college basketball last year. There were reports that they've spent over $7 million to put that roster together this past season, and they were rewarded by losing to Oakland and Jack Golke in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But like, now you're going to head into this coaching carousel, being able to make waves. Like, this is the best job in college basketball. You have a ton of resources. You're going to have a ton of money to put together a really, really talented roster. Like, some really good high major coaches are going to want this job, and a lot of other coaches are going to get paid because of this job opening.
Man, there's a Moneyball joke to be made there about the most expensive roster in the sport to losing to Oakland in the first round. But I want to get to, you mentioned a lot of these coaches that might be interested in the Kentucky job. I'm trying to remember, this is the first time a blue blood's been open, right? Because Duke had their succession plan. I know Carolina didn't really look too far outside the family. Just go to Hubert Davis. There wasn't a ton of rumors there. But is this the first one that's been open since Cal was hired at Kentucky?
Depending on how you feel about UCLA.
Yeah, that's exactly the one I was thinking.
We found out how people felt about UCLA, right? They had to get down to their ninth choice.
Totally. Well, and then it's like, how do you feel about Louisville as a potential blue blood? Or like, you know, UConn obviously had the talent or the titles, but they're kind of like the new blood. They're not like that old blood. You know, even Indiana, so to speak, like they had an opening, but they kind of had that one pretty much lined up for a while. After Archie Miller left, it was pretty clear that Mike Woodson was going to be the guy. So it's different, and it's also different with how this ended. You know, John Calipari, he made some tweaks this year, but I think that Kentucky.
Oh, we lose him there.
Help me out here, Cam.
Isaac, you still there? Let's try and get Isaac.
Try to get him right
back. It's unusual though because I like coaching searches. But this one feels so much bigger. It's not a Louisville, right? It's not a UCLA, obviously, as we found out.
Although, how is Louisville doing what they're doing in the portal already?
They're making moves, baby. They're making moves. Is Kentucky the biggest job in college basketball though? It feels like Texas.
That I probably wouldn't fight you over that.
In football, it feels like Texas. In almost every sense, in how toxic it can be, in how the expectations for winning probably outweigh what's realistic in the sport.
Although there are some fundamental differences.
What's that?
National championships. Although
number of.
Yeah. Kentucky's been void. Recent
history is pretty close.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
You know,
I'm with you there. I think Kentucky comes by a little more honest than
Texas does. Right? Texas kind of has an inflated sense of self-worth despite the lack of titles. Kentucky came by their inflated sense of self-worth, honestly. But in the 21st century, samesies, right? In terms of national titles, just the one.
Samesies, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you got 05 for Texas, you got 12 for Kentucky, and that's it. It's a
although Cal's, I think his win percentage is still what, 74?
I
Is
mean,
he like 741 guy at Kentucky?
At Kentucky or career?
Kentucky.
Let me see here.
Because it's something like that.
Oh, it's insane. Like, he has won a ton of basketball there.
I think he wins almost 75% of his games, right?
Yes, he is I mean, for whatever flaws that he has, winning at a super high level, not really one of them. He's pushing 800. He's 771.
Yeah. Okay.
750 in conference.
And he's got 5 SEC titles since 12, and Arkansas has had none. So,
yeah, he's that dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe we have Isaac Trotter back now from 24/7 Sports. Isaac, you were kind of in the middle of an answer there about Cal and how this thing went down, how it wasn't really sustainable for him the way it was
after making the tweaks. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's a pendulum higher. I think we're going to see a situation where, instead of being behind the curve in college basketball, I think Kentucky's going to really try to find somebody who is ahead of the curve. And I think Nate Oates is probably the biggest name right now with what he's done with Alabama. I mean, you want to talk Moneyball, Alabama's roster was not very expensive to put together. A lot of mid-major transfers on that group, and they make the Final Four. So he's probably the biggest name to watch with Kentucky right now.
So what about a guy, and I know it took him, 18, 19, 20 years to win at Baylor, but what about a guy like Drew?
He makes a ton of sense too. I know that, he's very, very connected with Mitch Barnhart and the Kentucky athletic director. They're really, really close. Like they're very close friends. And I think that, we talk a lot about that during a coaching carousel, but this one is actually a real relationship that has some real meat and bones there. So I think he would make a lot of sense. It does necessarily come down to like what he wants, because he's a legend at Baylor. He's going to have a statue there one day. He's the best coach of all time at that program, and it's just going to be hard to top that. He built that program from the ground. Like, this is one of the worst teams in the Big 12, and now they're winning a national title. Like, that just doesn't happen. And Drew's obviously near the top of his game. He's recruiting at a really high level. He's recruited the portal at a high level. If Kentucky's able to get him, how does that fail? Like, they just feel like a really, really good match.
And I mean, listen, this doesn't seem like he's been at Baylor. He got there in 02, I think, or 02, right? Like that on the heels of a murder scandal, right? So it's like, it just doesn't see it. He may be ready for a change, or do you think at this juncture he's like, golly, man, I think I built this thing to where it's sustainable. He's a 3-time coach of the year.
Isaac, you still there?
Did we lose him again? Cam, what is going on?
Oh, I think we lost him again. Yeah, Scott Drew's super interesting because he's only coached 1 year anywhere else. He coached 1 year at Valpo.
I was going to say Valpo.
And then he takes over directly after the murder scandal, where 2 players murdered another player, and then the coach helped cover it up. Like, when we say murder scandal, we are not exaggerating. I get it's been 20 years, so maybe not everybody remembers that. But like, took over in the midst of a murder scandal. You thought Coach Rule had a mess to clean up at Baylor when he took over, which he did. An actual murder scandal on campus involving his team. Took over there. They took him a few years to get going, but he's gone to a couple Elite Eights. He's gone to a couple Sweet 16s. Obviously, he had the national championship as well. We've got Isaac Trotter back, hopefully
for good. Fingers crossed.
That third time's a charm here with Isaac Trotter. So you like the match of Scott Drew and Kentucky potentially, but is there any concern that he's been at Baylor for so long, we really don't have proof of concept of him anywhere else?
I think that's fair. I do think, though, in the modern era, when you just talk about, hey, like, can you recruit from the high school ranks? And Baylor's done that. They've gotten pros every single year. Jacoby Walter and Yves Nisi are the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Can you recruit the transfer portal? Yes, he's done that. Mm-hmm. And they're going to have resources there. I think it's a no-brainer.
Isaac, let me ask you something, and it's not just coincidence because they're in Big Ten country now, but how good of jobs are USC and Michigan, respectively, basketball-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very, very fair question at this point. I think USC has flexed its muscles a little bit, being able to get Eric Musselman out there. Now, he wanted to leave Arkansas too, so getting back to Southern California made it a little bit easier. But I think Michigan has had a lot of issues with the department, especially the admissions department, trying to get transfers in for a while, like under Juwan Howard. If you look at the numbers, they had 8 transfers transferred in. 7 of them were grad transfers because they couldn't do that undergraduate transfers.
Yep.
The credits were not transferring into Michigan very well. And so that's a real problem there. So they've tried to do their best to fix that. Dusty May taking that job makes me think that they have sold him that, hey, this isn't going to be a problem moving forward. We're ready to be in a modern era of college basketball. We're ready to ramp up our transfer portal abilities and also the money to be able to get those guys in. So I think it still remains to be seen. I don't think that those are the top tier jobs in the Big Ten, but they certainly aren't like that far away from reaching that top tier with a couple more additions and tweaks to their arsenal.
Isaac, as I look at some of the movement we've had here, you mentioned Musselman going to Southern Cal, obviously Enfield going to SMU, Calipari going to Arkansas. Do you think we might be entering into an era, and this would kind of be an argument against Drew taking the Kentucky job, where fit and comfortability for a coach maybe matters more than the opportunity that a Kentucky or one of these really big jobs represents? Like, Scott Drew's probably pretty comfortable in Waco, and going to Kentucky, he's entering into a whole different kind of bear trap there if he takes that job.
No, it's a good point. And I also I wonder if the portal has certainly started to level off the playing field a little bit. I mean, Matt Painter talked about it this week at the Final Four. Like, obviously, the teams that have the most resources are still loading up and getting the best players in college basketball. Like, that hasn't changed, and nothing's changed with that. But I do wonder if it's a situation where with the portal, it's just like there's so many good young players that you could find at mid-major ranks that could potentially give you an opportunity to win, that you're able to find some guys that, like, the high majors just don't have room for, and you're able to win right away. Like, we've seen mid-major transfers, especially from the Missouri Valley, conference last year. They all crushed. Marcus Damask went to Illinois and was awesome. Ben Creaky at Iowa was a really good player. Lance Jones is helping Purdue win be a national championship contender. Obviously, Rink Mass goes from Bradley to Nebraska and has a phenomenal year. And so those, I feel like the portal has really leveled the playing field a little bit. So yes, maybe you're not spending as much as Kentucky to win it, to put your roster together, but you can still win if you get the right guys and the right veterans and get old and have that nice mix of retention. You can, or even if your roster maybe is a sixth of what Kentucky's, kind of using to put together their team.
Hey, short of the COVID year, Dan Hurley has won more games every year, and even in the COVID year, he had a better winning percentage at 15-8 than he did at 19-12 and 19-20. When you look at his ascent to this dominance at UConn, and we call him kind of a new blood and not necessarily a blue blood, although UConn fans bristle up at that a little bit. How are so many guys drawn to Storrs, Connecticut, when you look at basically how the basketball market has moved? How have they done it in Storrs?
Shoot, we lose him again?
Oh, muffins. Bam, he's on the phone, right?
Yeah, he's on the phone.
Yeah,
I think he just keeps dropping. He's got a bad cell or
he
something.
might just be in a bad connection. I'm glad you brought up Hurley. Obviously, we've got the national championship matchup tonight between Hurley and UConn and Purdue and Matt Painter. But is Hurley one of those guys that if you're Kentucky, you make him say no? Is that one of those where you're just like, hey, here's
I guess, but there's not a snowball's chance.
Probably not.
I mean, he doesn't remind me of Kentucky. He
feels like a Northeastern guy.
Yeah. Mean-spirited,
But I mean, Rick Pitino did okay at Kentucky.
Yeah, but Pitino wasn't like that yet.
Hasn't Pitino always kind of been like that?
Yeah, but remember, he took a little bit of the humble pie at Boston, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't know enough at Providence yet.
Sure.
So I don't know.
Okay.
And he still doesn't strike me as this on the same level of rub it in your face, step on your throat that Hurley does.
That's fair. We have Isaac back. Isaac, we were asking about Dan Hurley and kind of if we were
how's he getting guys to stores the way that he has, getting better every year when you look at the grand scheme of things of attractive places in NIL?
Yeah, I would say that, UConn, I wouldn't say is a destination. I don't think anybody's going out their way to go to stores, right? But I do wonder if Dan Hurley has maybe unlocked the recipe to win big in college basketball of just the right mix of retention and then really understanding like player development. And most importantly, I think they know their roles. Like Steph Castle is a 5-star recruit that came in with literally zero expectations of starting. Donovan Clingan was a big-time recruit that came in understanding he had to sit a year and learn and play 15 minutes off the bench. So I just feel like their role allocation at UConn is just different. But, he's a candidate for this Kentucky job. And if you look at this roster, they got 6 guys coming back next year. A lot of young guys. Like, of course, they'd be able to hit the portal and be decent. But, like, if he wants to leave, it might not be a horrible time to do it when you could have all 5 starters, either go pro, exhaust eligibility, or move on. And it might not be the worst time for Dan Hurley to potentially parlay maybe 2 national titles into maybe the best job in college basketball.
Isaac, I could have made that same argument for Dan Hurley last year where he's losing 3 guys to the NBA in Sanogo, Hawkins, and Jackson. But he came back. Like, how good of a coaching job was this? Because a lot of people are comparing it to 06-07 Florida, but they brought everybody back. This dude lost his 3 best players of the NBA and was like, hey, no problem. We're going to be better next year. Like, I don't know that we've acknowledged how good of a job he did this year in context of what actually happened.
They're better.
They're much better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. I mean, I think that, like, that's why it was so crazy to me that he didn't necessarily run away with the National Coach of the Year thing, because it's like we just haven't seen something like this. It's unprecedented. And the way it all came together is crazy, too, because they wanted Cam Spencer really bad, but they were also really recruiting the Timberlake kid, Nick Timberlake, who went to Kansas. So it's like, oh, if we could get Timberlake or Spencer, we got a chance to be really good. They end up getting Spencer. Timberlake goes to Kansas, and they got the better player of that, too. So, like, it's just like the perfect mix of, like, the right guys coming in, the right culture, the right returners, and then a little bit of luck, too, because I don't think they're here with Nick Timberlake in the starting lineup compared to with Cam Spencer.
Some similarities in terms of these guys, and you talk about maybe underappreciated or not recognizing. Matt Painter's over here, like, raising his hand here, hold my Gatorade. Everybody talked about what they weren't, what they haven't been, what's wrong with their backcourt, their inability to make these deep runs. He's got them right there. How much tonight do you think can Purdue get it in a position where it actually comes down to where you can think, where you may use a term like, hey, that was a good coaching adjustment. Hey, that was a good coaching matchup. Could it be that kind of game tonight where all eyes are on what's happening on the bench?
It's just the margins for error in this game are just so thin. We talked all year long about, UConn, basically, they have the best defensive big man in the country. Purdue has just the 7'4", 300-pound monster. And I just feel like they are basically going to do their thing and kind of cancel each other out. And it is going to come down to, like, some of these supporting pieces. And I personally, selfishly think it'd be really cool for Purdue to win the national title, just because I think it gives credence to, like, that theory that you can build without the portal, because they only have 1 transfer on the roster. They don't have, like, they have 1 top 100 recruit on the roster. This is all, like, homegrown development, underrated guys that have kind of come together and become one of the best teams in college basketball. And I think that's cool. Like, with the sport changing and it feels like an arms race and, oh, we got to get all this money. Oh, we have to hit back the same donors, got to give us more money. This year, we need even more money, need more resources, need more NIL. Like, and to see Purdue win their way, it's just different. And I think that's really, really cool. And this game tonight is going to be a war. UConn's going to play multiple different ball screen coverages. Braden Smith has had his head on a swivel for this. He had one of his worst games in the Final Four, but if he, flushes it and plays maybe his best game tonight, I think that would be, the tilting of the scales here between 2 of the best teams in the sport.
Sometimes we talk about officiating, adjusting to the style or speed of the game or this, but rarely do you see 2 bigs and 2 teams that run so many ball screen actions with guys that are this good at rim protecting at that size. At the end of the day, Isaac, do you feel you will be talking about how this game was officiated?
I hope not. I really hope not. I think we've seen as the tournament has progressed, more and more opportunities for the players to win on the floor, unless you're watching the women's game in the Final Four there with the late screen.
Yeah.
That was probably an incorrect screen, but at the time it was a little bit rough. But
it's still a 50-50 call, right? Like I don't know. That one still bugs me, but neither here nor there.
Right, I totally get it. And so tonight, like, I feel like hopefully the players are able to do it on the floor. And the thing is with Zach Edey and Purdue all year long, he doesn't foul. Like, he really doesn't foul. You know, he's had a couple that didn't get called that he absolutely should be called for, but for the most part this year, he's done a great job of just avoiding those fouls. Part of me wonders if he can do that tonight. Sometimes I think they might need him to drop the hammer on somebody near the rim, because you cannot let UConn get comfortable putting pressure on the rim, because if they do, I think Purdue could be in real trouble.
How are the runs that UConn has been able to go on? How do you think it gets away from coaches? I know Bama tried to do a really good job, and Oates was like, I'm going to use my timeouts. There's going to be very few long runs, but UConn always sneaks in a couple, man, whether they're beating the TV timeouts or a timeout. How important is it to just stop their many runs?
Yeah, their body blows. And that's the thing, is Hurley is just trying to break you. And I think it's the best thing about UConn is that, like, they use you against yourself. You they scored a couple buckets. I'm going to come down. I'll have a little bit of an opening for three. I'm going to take it. That's like a layup for UConn, because if they can get in transition, it's all it takes is one bad shot for you. And they're so good on the glass, and they're so good in transition, and they're so good with their look ahead passes that it's automatically a bucket. And you know, Marquette talks about kills all the time, like 3 stops in a row. That's great. I feel like UConn has like avalanches, where it's not just 3 stops in a row. It's 3 stops, it's 3 buckets, and it's a 7-0 run before you can think. And then it's 10-0. And then if you're Illinois, it's 30-0. And you're like, how did this happen? And that's what they do. That's just what they do. They're so disciplined. They just don't hurt themselves. And that's why this game tonight is so good, because like Purdue really doesn't make those mistakes. They really don't turn the basketball over. They're undefeated this year, 29-0, when they turn the basketball over less than a fifth of their possession. So that's the stat I'm looking for again. If they're turning it over less than 20%, Purdue's winning.
You know what I think it is with Purdue? They can always get you to foul them. See, they can stop your momentum, because the way that they play offense, you almost have the momentum's always broken by a foul being called because of the way you have to defend Edey. It's hard to get into a rhythm against them.
It really is. And the thing too is that like I'm really fascinated about like what UConn does defensively when Klingon is not on the floor. Because Samson Johnson, he's 6'10", he's 225 pounds. Like Edey has 75 pounds on him. Edey has 6 inches on him. So like I think they're going to play Edey one-on-one and try not to foul him when Klingon's on the floor. But for those 10 to 15 minutes when Johnson's on the floor, I mean, good luck, man. Like, it's going to be very, very different. I think you're going to see UConn try to double those ball screens, try to dig down on him, try to get him to turn it over. You know, a lot of teams lately, it's the moment that Edey dribbles, they're just pouncing in like hyenas to try to knock the ball away from him. And I think that's kind of the game plan. But it's just 2 very different defensive game plans that Purdue will have to be very, very aware of, because they're drastically different. Like UConn, when their starting lineups in, they don't force a lot of turnovers. When their bench comes in, they force a ton of turnovers. It's a wild thing, and that's why Hurley's so good. He can kind of beat you a lot of different ways.
Isaac Trotter, 24/7 Sports. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Isaac.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We'll be right back in 5 minutes. We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as well. We're on KFOR in this third hour here we're in Omaha. KFOR is in Lincoln. You can hear us across the state, though, or if you're on one of our streams, you can hear us across the country, even the world. We had I've seen some people check in from Hong Kong on the podcast before, too. So we're big in Hong Kong. We appreciate everybody, no matter where you're listening. But if you're here locally, if you're in Omaha, Lincoln, you can go to Warhorse Sportsbook. And it's too late to get in on the prop card challenge. It's too late to do that, but you can still just place regular old bets on the game tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Got the location in Lincoln at the casino, or you can go to the kiosks at Horseman's Park here in Omaha. Maybe a little action. Maybe you like what Isaac Trotter's talking about and saying, I think Purdue's going to get UConn in foul trouble. I don't know that they're going to turn the ball over too much. I want to put a little money on Purdue tonight. Maybe you just hate Danny Hurley like I do, and you want to root against him and have a little financial stake involved as well. Make sure you get over to Warhorse Sportsbook. You can place bets on nearly every major sporting event, live bets, straight bets, parlays, in-game, whatever you can think of. Make sure you go to warhorsesportsbook.com for a full list of details and house rules, or get the Warhorse Sportsbook app where you could build your bets and then go to the casino or Horseman's Park and place them there. Warhorse Sportsbook, no bets, no glory. Wanted to touch on something real quick, not to trigger Nebraska basketball fans or anything, but just want to put this out here that Sporting News has named Fred Hoiberg as a good candidate for Nebraska. Not that they are talking to him, but as somebody they think would be a good candidate at Kentucky.
Stop.
It's on. It's right there. See, Sporting News. I didn't do it.
I get it. I get. Where was he in the? Did they rank him in order? Yeah. Okay. Sixth. Who would they start with?
Mark Pope.
Yeah, I keep hearing that.
Yeah, I don't love it.
Well, Roots. Obviously.
I get it, but I mean, you're taking Pope over Nate Oates?
No.
Yeah, not in a million years.
And I didn't mean like Toby and Kunta. I meant like.
Yeah, not like Roots.
Like
Mark Pope has roots in Kentucky.
Yeah, Lexington.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't start there. Although he's done a fantastic job.
He has. He's done a great job. I also, people have brought up Sean Miller a lot. Obviously, he's got the background at a high level at Arizona. He has done. I mean, he's back at Xavier. Obviously,
Guarantee Arizona would take him back in a heartbeat.
Would they? Are they not loving the Tommy Lloyd experience?
Well, I think they love his recruiting.
Yeah, we got to win games at some point.
Yeah, their rosters, and they're just going to keep putting guys in the league.
Yeah, their rosters for what they've done, not impressive.
Lloyd has gotten some fellas up there.
Now they haven't.
Did you see all the airtime that Preston got? How about that, Coach Murph?
I know,
doing the darn thing.
Yeah, he got a lot of screen time on the video. We appreciate that from our guy, Coach Murphy.
My buddy was asking about Trelly. He was like, "Gosh, was Trelly like that in high school?" And I said, "The cool thing about Latrell is he was always a bucket, right? Like he would."
But he kept getting better.
He was good from like 26 and in, but I think people question his ball handling at the next level, and could he get his own shots? And I think him staying with it, because he always had the mentality. Like, I mean, he's you talk about guarding your yard, like he's a dog.
Yeah.
And it's just really good to see him competing at a high level, and it just continues your string of your locals talk, of guys that are from the area that have really managed to have really good careers.
Play locally in college. Let's see.
Stop it.
So he's at Alabama now, so that's not local.
From Fullerton, who came in out of nowhere. But by the way, how about their presence?
Went into Cal State Fullerton out of high school, which is also not local.
And they think they're onto something because they're back again recruiting this cycle around.
So what you're telling me is another really good basketball player.
Stop it.
So did he have any offers locally here?
Stop it.
I'm trying to check all the boxes.
Flame on.
Was he like, yeah, it would be cool. Yeah, I appreciate the offer, Omaha, but I actually want to live in California for a few years. Because that's one thing. That's another just to be like, nah, you can't play for us. You know what I mean? There's a difference there. Not that I have any particular feelings about the situation.
Yeah, 100%.
I just no, I think it's interesting. I do think if you're Kentucky, you probably make a couple phone calls that you're not getting out of there with a yes, but you probably have to make them. I think Danny Hurley's probably one of those phone calls. Somebody mentioned Jay Wright, and I was like, I don't think that's the guy you want.
Can you get him to come out of retirement?
First of all,
and he's not. He really doesn't strike me as that type of guy.
So that's the thing is, I think Kentucky would hate Jay Wright because he's not going to go get the guy. Because here's what you have to do at Kentucky, right? You have to recruit at a super high level and then win at a super high level.
Yeah.
You can't do it the way that Jay Wright wants to do it, which is recruit at a pretty high level and then win at a super high level. They want all the NBA lottery picks and they want to win at a super high level. That's not really what Jay Wright did, right? A lot of end of the first, second-round guys on Jay Wright's rosters.
Yeah.
Those aren't the guys that Kentucky wants.
A few more Scotty Reynolds than you'd like.
Well, I mean, more like your Jalen Brunsons, right? Scotty Reynolds was kind of in the dead period.
Yeah, but Reynolds was one of those guys that is going to really win at a
really good college player.
Well, he could be like the Twins.
Yeah. Really good college player.
You know,
maybe not great in the NBA.
And
right?
you could make the case that that when he had the Twins in his backcourt at Kentucky, I mean, it's no coincidence.
The best teams that he had. Yeah.
So maybe, but I
sometimes you need guys.
I don't see it.
I don't either. And I think Jay Wright left because of the way the game was going, and he just didn't feel like he had the energy for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think all of a sudden Kentucky is a less energy demanding job, right? I think he probably likes what he's doing on TV there. But I think you make Danny Hurley say no. I think that's about the only one, though, outside of the obvious candidates that's definitely going to say no, right? I don't know. I don't think you go to Bill Self. That doesn't make any sense.
No,
because he's not leaving. He's not leaving, right? You can make an argument.
He's basically got a lifetime contract.
You can make an argument that Kentucky is a better job than UConn. You can make that argument. I don't know that I would, but you can, right? You can't really make a argument that Kentucky's that much a significantly better job than Kansas.
Mm-mm.
That doesn't exist,
and it can't be about money. He's he's the man.
The only jobs that I consider in the same category are Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina. That's the group. After that, everybody else is on that next tier.
Slot accordingly.
Yeah, you have to kind of understand your place in the world, right?
Yeah.
UConn, for as much success as they've had, and more in the 21st century than Kentucky has, step down from Kentucky. They're that next step down from Kentucky. I don't put them in the same category.
Well, the job's not going to be open very long, so
no. But it probably open past tonight, I would guess. I don't, just think they probably have to make that phone call
for sure by Wednesday.
Oh yeah. I think tomorrow we get an announcement, one way or another. I think
you're not hiring a search firm for that one. Are you?
I think they called Danny Hurley sometime around 1 a.m. Get a yes or a no, and then they call Nate Oates. Although there's some people on this Billy Donovan train, and I'm not sure I see it. He hasn't coached college basketball in a long time.
Yeah, he does. He's highly successful, though. I would imagine
college he was. I mean, I get NBA is totally different games. So you don't want to hold that against him.
They're coming around nicely right now, right?
I mean, they're okay. He's not been great in Chicago. Now, a lot of that's front office. The front office has been a disaster.
And that's been a tough franchise.
It is.
And he's got to keep his guys healthy, but
it's been a really long time since he's coached college basketball. It's a very different game than it was when he left.
Yeah.
Everything that we talk about has been since he left college basketball. Transfer portal, everything is different. That's a place where I don't know if he makes sense. And he's not don't you kind of want a younger guy if you're Kentucky? You want a guy that can be there for 10 years? Or do you not care? Are you hiring a 71-year-old Patino to come back?
I don't know. That track record is the last
handful of years. 15 years.
No, the last handful of years of their lack of success in the postseason.
Yeah.
I think you want best available. You'll worry about age later.
Okay.
Although it's probably in the realm of discussion. But how old is too old in college basketball?
I probably want to go less than 60.
Oh,
it's a hard job now.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's always been hard, but it keeps getting it's not getting any easier.
100%.
It is not getting any easier to be a college coach of any kind, right? That's why Coach Rule gravitates towards young guys that are grinders. He knows how hard that job is.
And
if you want a grinder at Kentucky, you don't want somebody that's not wanting to work.
Well, see, the funny thing about you saying that out loud is that how Kentucky feels about
well, that's the difference, right? Because if they want a grinder,
I don't know if that's I highly doubt that's their profession. That's their perception.
No, but if they understand that, they should go get TJ Otzelberger. No?
It's a big time step.
We'll see what happens.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up the show here on a Monday here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube here at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill on the Pillar Exterior stage. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. And we have been, about knee deep in this coaching carousel talk here with college basketball. But it kind of got a question going in my mind as I'm thinking about all this over the weekend. As it started with seeing Enfield go from USC to SMU and seeing Musselman go from Arkansas to USC. And then obviously that opened the door up for Calipari to Arkansas that we saw late last night. And now you've got one of the biggest jobs in all of sports really opened up for the Kentucky head men's basketball coach job. And it got me thinking about what the difference is.
The weird thing about saying that is
it's true though, isn't it?
I don't know, but relative to its own sport, it's like it belongs in a certain cluster.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like I'm not sure, the head coach like Dallas, the Dallas Cowboys has a peer. I'm not sure.
Fair. Yeah. That's probably the only one in football that's like that though, right? Like head coach of the Dallas Cowboys is its own tier of.
I mean, how many do you think there are in college football?
There's a handful. It's Alabama.
See, I don't know if I would agree with that.
Really?
Do you know how many coaches they went through before they found Saban?
Yeah, no, about the same amount that Kentucky went through between Tubby and Calipari.
Yeah,
They went on a little run there.
Like, I think I still would slot Alabama behind Notre Dame. I still would slot.
Okay.
Because they had to get the right guy. I'm talking about.
Notre Dame went
I'm not
through a
talking about
run.
which one's a. I'm not talking about which one's a better job. I think you said that it was like
one of the best jobs in sports.
The biggest job in sports.
I said one of the biggest jobs in sports.
Yeah, I don't.
I think there's probably, I don't know what the number is. There's probably
immediately there's 4 peers in college basketball.
Yes, I agree with that.
Immediately.
Well, 3 peers. They're the 4th, right?
Yeah.
North Carolina, Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, right? So there's 4 teams in college basketball I consider on the same level. You've got a handful of teams in college football. I think Alabama's there. I think you're talking about the biggest jobs in college football are like Alabama, Notre Dame, Texas.
I'll be curious to see. Like, it's probably a better discussion to have in like 10 years.
Probably.
Like post Saban.
But I'm saying
because a lot of guys, like, it wasn't
biggest jobs, not necessarily best jobs, right? Because best jobs is different because you're talking expectations, whatever. Yeah. But biggest jobs in terms of the amount of effort and resources and attention that gets paid to it.
Sure.
Obviously, Dallas Cowboys head coach is in that category.
New York Yankees.
I don't know that New York Yankees managers is in that discussion anymore.
I think it is
because I in my mind at least,
the organization supersedes the person.
Right. No, but that's why I think it's less about the manager than it used to be. Right.
When I say the organization supersedes the person, it's like that job, once you have it, it's better than any place you've probably come from.
Sure. But I don't know that I don't know. I don't think of, and maybe it's because I de-emphasize the manager in baseball too much, but I think baseball has, like, I used to really think about, okay, your Bobby Coxes and your Joe Torres and like your Lou Pinellas, like these big personalities is your Dusty Bakers, whoever, right? As these big personalities, these kind of almost face of the franchise type guys as managers. And I don't think that way about baseball anymore. And I don't know if that's a me problem, if that's a way baseball's moved because of the emphasis on analytics and stuff like that, where we think about the manager less. But I don't think about the Yankees manager pretty much ever.
Yeah, it's a great job though.
Sure, yeah. I don't know that I would. But so whether you put it in that category or not, I guess isn't really the point. But
yeah,
the thing that I keep thinking about in regards to this conversation, and it is more college focused, is what's the difference between being at a place that has won national titles? This is kind of like an Alabama question, almost kind of the way you were thinking, but it applies to a lot of different places. A place that has won national titles and a place that you feel like you can win national titles moving forward, right? Like Arkansas is a good example, right? They've won national titles in college basketball.
It feels like at first blush there's a lot more of the latter.
And where at Kentucky?
No, places where you can
win
a national.
You think there's a bigger group?
Yeah.
And I think we think that way. I don't know how realistic that is, though. And I think there's a lot of places that have won national titles that we don't look at and be like, oh, that's a place you can still win national titles at, right? UCLA, that's a tough one for basketball, for sure. Yeah, I don't know that you're winning national titles at Indiana anymore. I don't know that you're winning national titles at, like you go way back, like San Francisco.
Like I could see Texas winning a national championship in basketball before I could Indiana. And I never, ever thought I would say that because I was the guy that was kind of taken aback at whatever poll that was, like in 14 or 15, that called Texas one of the top 10 basketball jobs in the country.
Yeah, because I probably wouldn't. That's probably.
And I was like, wait, it is?
Gut check, that doesn't sit right with me, but it might be. I mean, again, probably one of the bigger jobs, even if it's not one of the best jobs.
But it's just kind of, it's.
But we saw it with like Texas Tech, right? They were a game away from winning a national title.
How did Gonzaga, in its perception, surpass UCLA when UCLA was just in a Final Four?
Yeah, not that long ago.
So it didn't seem like they would need enough to push them back over into the frontal lobe, given their history. But it seems like we kind of forgot about UCLA again, even though they're because of the couple of down years. Right?
I mean, well, I totally wrote them off when we were having that conversation with Isaac, right? When I'm listing off Blue Bloods, UCLA never crossed my mind. And they were the bluest of bloods, right, for a long time. I just, when you think about it with, like, I don't know that I look at Arkansas, because I'm trying to figure out, okay, what job's a good job, what job's a better job? Why does it make sense for Andy Enfield to go from USC to SMU? And why does it make sense for Eric Musselman? Now, part of it, again, is I think he wants to be in Southern California, wants to be in that part of the country, so that's a little different for Musselman, right? But
God, he was so popular
at first blush,
Fayetteville.
USC's not a better job than Arkansas, right?
Doesn't seem like it. Although, I mean, they've had a couple lottery picks.
Yeah, no, they've had some good guys, but I just don't. I don't look at it. I don't look at USC as, like, USC is a great example. I don't necessarily look at that as like, oh, that's a place you can win national championships in basketball, and it probably is, right? There's nothing that prohibits you at USC, because like UCLA, the money is such a problem.
Playing in the then
Pac-12 was probably a problem, but like UCLA, their
Conference of Champions,
institutional money is an issue, right? Because they're a state school, they don't have any money. Like, there's a place where you're like, resources are going to hold me back. USC is a private school; they don't have that issue, so there's no institutional reason for me to think, oh, USC can't win national championships. But I sit here and I still think that.
Although you asked Lynn Swann and those guys when they were at the helm, and this may be separate from how people viewed he did his job, but it seemed like they had some shortcomings with buyouts and their accessibility to resources too. Maybe that was just that they couldn't bring their old guys back into the fray for a sec. But
yeah, so there's a difference in my mind between institutional resources and
the whole state school thing.
Booster resources, right? Institutional resources are like, hey, the state budget doesn't have anything for me. Whereas other resources are, I can't activate the boosters in the way that I need to, right? Because there's plenty of money in alums,
which is one of the things
USC,
that people
right?
talked about, UCLA and football, like getting those guys re-engaged,
which is why Deshaun Foster was the pick.
Yeah, why Kelly didn't really want to seem to do that.
Right. And so I look at these different jobs and I actually see Kentucky and Arkansas as a more logical move, despite the tensions with Calipari and Kentucky. But that seems more logical to me than Arkansas to USC. Is that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is crazy.
I don't know if it seems that way, but when you say it out loud, like, you can convince yourself without feeling like you need to be checked out.
Yeah, like I don't feel like I don't have to do too many mental hurdles. Like when I hear Calipari to Arkansas, I was like, yeah, it's a step down. I get that. But when I heard Musselman to USC, I was like, wait, what?
So I think the thing with Cal is, and how you look at that job, is they think Cal can next level those guys based on the individual. So that's kind of how you can look at the schools. Does he really can he maintain the whole Duke thing, even though we associate Duke with Coach K?
Yeah.
So I guess the whole individual bigger than the institution versus like some of that's a thing
versus being an actual blue blood.
Yeah.
Right, because being an actual blue blood means you transcend the individual.
Because then that job, it's like, oh man, and then all of a sudden you look at that coach in a different light.
That's why Nick Saban was important for Alabama, and I think, speaking of Nick's,
he re-legitimized that program
as a program and not just a guy.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
that's why
I get it.
Like Osborne winning national titles at Nebraska was important for Nebraska because it all of a sudden went from it's a thing Bob Devaney was able to do. But then you win them again in a generation later in the 90s, and you're like, oh, no, this is a Nebraska thing now, right? If you win with more than one coach, all of a sudden that's a program thing, not a coach thing. That's what makes it really challenging with Duke, right? Because they don't have the track record with anybody besides Coach K.
Yeah.
Carolina did. Carolina had Dean Smith, then they go Roy Williams. You go all the way back. They had titles in the 50s. Like, Carolina had more of that track record. But there are certain places where...
Do you have to be able to associate a school with more than one coach?
So that's where I was kind of going was, have they been successful?
Because Duke, you can't.
You really can't. But with the best actual programs, you can identify successful eras at the highest level. So I'm talking national championships with multiple coaches. If you can't do that, then it was the coach, not the program. UCLA, John Wood. I get to have another one under Jim Herrick, I think it was. But you don't think of Jim Herrick in national championship.
Was that 90? Is that with Eddie and those guys?
94. Okay. Highest Eddie, yeah.
No, Ben. Okay.
Coast to coast.
I remember that.
But they're really not in that category because you have a one-off. That's something to noodle about for tomorrow. More Hurrdat Sports Radio on a Tuesday.